Welcome, everyone, to the Tuesday, March 11th, 2025 school board meeting. Patty, may we have the roll call, please?
Michelle Wheeler.
Here.
Liz Barrett. Here. Tish Campbell.
Here.
Nancy Clayberg.
Here.
Pip Clues.
Here.
Brian French.
Here.
Thank you, everyone.
Recording in
Byron.
progress.
Byron Maddow. Lee Hudson. Carrie Nolte.
Here.
Lisa Rappaport.
Here.
Eric Moore.
Present.
Nathan Delaney.
Here.
And Byron may be joining us via Zoom at 8 o'clock, so
Okay.
we'll keep that in mind. Okay, can we all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we have announcements and recognitions. Does anyone have anything they would like to say?
So we are lucky because our representative from SAU 50 wears two hats here in the district. And so I had talked in advance to Ms. Wheeler about the fact that we have the Student Government Day is upcoming for the city. We're in the third year of the revitalization of that program. And she's doing a lot of the coordinating at the school level for that. And there's some updates that would be good for the board to hear about it. So I'm hoping she can do a short announcement on kind of what's happening in relation to that.
Sure. So this is our third year. It had decades prior with Mary Foley, and then it took a little hiatus and COVID, and we've sort of revamped it. This year we have 46 kids currently signed up to shadow different members of local government, both from the school board side and from the governance side. We have our planning meeting this Thursday during our flex block at the high school, where the city manager, city clerk, counselor are going to come and sort of help the students understand what goes into all of this. And then we encourage the students to participate in a student council meeting or a council meeting or a school board meeting, depending on their position. And we have the actual Student Government Day, which is going to be on the 26th, where it's an all-day field trip here, and the students hold a mock meeting, and they take on the role that they've shadowed for the day. And we have, it's grown each year, so I think kids are excited about it, and we're excited about it.
Awesome.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you for all your hard work on that. It's a fun day.
It is a fun day.
I remember when we did it years ago, all the kids wanted was longer recess. That was one of the big things when the elementary school kids did it.
Last year it was pickleball.
Yeah. But it's fun. It's a good day for everyone.
And I think we will be, the extent to which people can be available for some of those dates, and I'll email everybody. This has been over the last couple of years really a council-driven thing more than the school side of the equation. Kids shadow a bunch of us in the school district, but they do in some cases they are shadowing city council members, and so I hate to have folks skip over us and move off. You know what I mean? It's like, so we will send out some dates and additional information for folks, and if you can join us for any of those things, it would really be great.
Okay.
Nancy, I would just say tomorrow night the boys basketball team plays in Rochester for the D1 semifinals, and then tonight either the girls hockey team is finishing up or has finished their game.
We're going to
Yeah, that's what Cap just said, so that's cool.
I was at the game on Saturday, Sunday, whatever it was, and the freshman player, Dylan Schwartz, made the three-pointer. Right at the last minute, the last 10 seconds of the game, he made a three-pointer, which took us over the top. So it was very exciting. And the place was packed. You couldn't get a seat. It was so crowded. So it was a fun night for Portsmouth High School Okay, anyone else?
Yeah,
Yes,
I
Tish.
wanted to just remind everybody that the Lister Academy is doing their Maple Day this Saturday. I'm really excited to go. The students there work really, really hard, tapping the trees, making the syrup. It looks like a really fun event, so I just wanted to remind everybody of that.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I'd say, and as part of that too, going out to the lower grades and having conversations with those students about
Yeah.
about how what the process is like. And some of the really neat stuff is seeing our Lister students, really be mentors for some of the younger kids. It's great for the younger kids. It's great for our students at Lister. So it's a really really successful program and a lot of work for the folks over at Lister, but it always has great outcomes.
Okay, thank you, everyone. We will move on to the consent agenda. We have 3 sets of minutes, February 4th, budget workshop, February 11th, regular meeting, February 18th, budget workshop. Can we vote on all of them in a block, or does anybody want to separate any of those? Okay, can we have a motion to accept those minutes?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Well, discussion?
Oh, discussion, sorry. Discussion? Yes, Liz.
My only concern with reading these minutes is, and I obviously appreciate everything Patty does, but I do wonder, they do seem very minimal. There's, like, for example, their budget work section from February 18th is 1 page. And so I guess part of me is, I think we had a conversation about this, but like, are we meeting our legal requirements in providing minutes that are like this? I mean, obviously our meetings are recorded too, so, I mean, we could reference, I don't know if it'd be worth it to put like reference YouTube in the link just in case to cover, but I was curious about that.
So we do meet our legal requirements. Our actual legal requirements are pretty limited. People need to understand what items were, for the most part, votes are the primary thing. You need attendance, you need votes. But beyond that, it's a purview of, the board and what the board would like to see done.
Okay, thank you. All in favor? Any opposed? Thank you, everyone. Okay, we'll move on to public comment. We have 2 speakers, Petra Huda and Esther Kennedy. And I guess there was some discussion about the fact that we never closed. I forgot to close the public hearing the last time. So Petra and Esther, you can speak as long as you want.
Peter Huda, 2A South Street. So the handout that I just handed to the chair is Inside Sources, and this is the New Hampshire Journal. Analysis, Portsmouth spending story explains how you get Doge. This is from February 25th, 2025, and I've highlighted some areas that I'm going to address tonight, but there are other questions and other people asking the same kind of questions that we are. And I'd like to point out in the middle of the page that the number of students is declining. And after the discussion I listened to last session, I found it very interesting because the look forward was only to look up, where the prediction from the New Hampshire Department of Education and most other studies is declining enrollment. So I guess I want to call your attention to the middle of the page here. And basically in 2001, Portsmouth School District had 2,706 students and was spending $42.8 million. In 2019, it slipped, and then it slipped again. Right now, we're at 2,428, while the spending per student is up to $25,488. So, first, that was something I did not hear discussed last time, and I wanted to discuss. Next thing, I'd like to thank whoever put out the actual budget detail, because that's what I'm going to address tonight. I know you have the books, and what was put out in detail was the 4.99%. So I'm going to go through that, and hopefully you could follow in your book. I don't know the page numbers because I think it was different online. So some big questions that I have. I'll go down through the cost centers because that's how I looked at them. And the first one I'd like to ask on cost center 109, which is the high school. I looked at the custodian salaries, FY25 versus FY26. You had 2 open positions. And in 25, the salaries for the open positions were $40,040. In 26, they were $48,360. Now, that's a 21% increase in salary, and not counting benefits. So my question is, since you are getting ready to approve this, and this goes for everything that I'm going to ask tonight, I guess you're okay with a 21% increase in salary. I'm not. I don't know how many of you got 21% between year to year, but I hadn't, and I hadn't in my career. The next thing I'd like to ask about is you still have on cost center 137. You still have an open position for a psychologist, and you did not take the salaries up. So I was looking at a custodial versus that. Okay, and then next thing, I'm going to start hitting the different cost centers. First question I would have is, you had a brand new cost center come in, and this is number 190, maintenance projects, and I noticed it was $200,000 actual spent in 2023, and then you put in $92,000 for maintenance for the modular classrooms last year, and then you have $42,000 in for this year. So I guess I'd like to know the status on that, because it seems like a lot of money to do setup, or unless this includes purchasing, which it didn't appear it did. The next one I'd like to talk to you about, and the big one here, I had a lot of questions on the central office. So the first question I have on central office, which is number 170, you have a business administrator salary and a district accountant salary. Now, this was listed as a specialist, which I found quite interesting. The salary last year for the administrator was $130. This year, it's $145. That's a 10% increase. I'd like to know why. I don't see anything that this was a promotion. The other one was a district accountant. That was starting at $85, and now it's up to $108. That's a 26.52% increase. Those are very large. The next thing I'd like to ask is on the clerical salaries. Last year, you had 3 clerical. This year, you added 1, and I don't see it anywhere listed in your book. Next one would be system teacher salaries listed into this. The big thing that jumped out at me here was the mentor teachers, $125,000. Question would be, can we use staff currently and pay them extra, the teachers that we do have? Next thing would be contract services, and this is legal. And last year we had 137, this year we have 140. That's not a large increase, but the detail of this is outside legal services. I wonder if we could have some economy of scale here using the large legal staff that we have at the City Hall. I'm trying to go fast so I don't take a lot of your time. The things that I'm asking about here this cost center amounts to a $268,000 increase. Please consider what I'm saying. Okay, next one is cost center 165, special ed OOD tuition and operating budget. The increases here are very large, especially to in-state tuition by itself. You have the regular system, you have the private elementary, the private middle school, and the high school. The total increase here is $1,027,711. That's very high. Along with that, also, and I think this will be addressed later, but also your transportation is up $147,000 based on this. And there were some questions asked last time, and I will let that go for Esther. The next one I would address is cost center number 177. The first thing here is tech plan contract services. You're adding in $72,000 here. I guess my question on a lot of these is, and I'm looking at, for example, tech plan new equipment. You went from $155,000 to $259,000, increase of $100,000. And this stuff was moved in because it had federal funds funding it last time. Question would be, you didn't have this before COVID. Do we need it now? All of these increases are, in my mind, this whole budget increased by $771,000. Is this something we need for tech, or could this be put on teachers and not have any layoffs at all? Most of these were federal funds. The other one, software, same thing, $90,000 increase. So please look at that, especially with the teacher salaries and the things that you want to get decrease on that. Those are the questions that I would have. I hope you would get answers on that before you move forward, especially the tech. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of teachers' salaries. Thank you.
Thank you, Petra. Next, we have Esther Kennedy.
Esther Kennedy, 41 Pickering Ave. And I just want to give you a figure. In 2018, and I went there just before the pandemic, our school budget was $46,573,527. You are proposing $67 million in 6 years. $67,250,271. We have gone up a third in this budget in 6 years. Now, I realize you all haven't been there, and this is your time to let the public know that you really are looking at not only the school, which you are voted on to do, but also to make sure the public resources are being utilized. That is a whole figure of $20,684,742 that we've gone up. That is not sustainable, folks. Now, I agree with Petra. There are other ways besides cutting teachers and staff to look at this. We have gone down in population for the same period of time in 6 years. 237 students. And I know as a school administrator, that doesn't always equate to finances, because I understand that those 237 students might be from different grade levels, different programs, and whatnot. However, it's something you need to consider. Your population is dropping, the evidence is here. I also and looking at the budget, and again, I want to thank, just like Peter did, the staff for putting the budget up on Wednesday. We appreciate it. But I really want you to look at not teachers. Now, I'm all for looking at retirements and seeing if we should rehire those positions, and I appreciate what you're doing, and you have done that. But that still isn't going to be sustainable. You need to look at other areas. Where can we cut? Now, Peter brought up the $771,000, that my guess, in the ESSER funds, and now it's being continued on. And Peter brought up a great question. Can that continue? I don't think it can. Another area is central office. Across the state, we're all being asked to look at our central office. Now, I'm not going to pass judgment, but positions were added. I really think you need to look at what is important in the central office. What services are important? Because central office, and I'm speaking from someone who sits in central office, the day-to-day of a teacher is not there. So I really encourage you, because there is a lot of things in there that I would question. So I asked the school board to look at central office. And then, like I said a week ago to you all, that special ed out of district is horrific. Now, I heard our superintendent say he's never been in a district that doesn't have someone in out-of-district placement. I would invite him to come up to Guilford. I have half of the population of Portsmouth. We have 1,300 kids. My budget for out-of-district is $120,000. Same kind of population. Our socioeconomic levels, when they look at the state, we're a medium size, you guys are a large, same socioeconomics. Again, I would encourage you to look at this out-of-district because it's gone up huge amounts in the last couple of years. You went up 1,356,000 in this year alone. We're not doing things right, folks. If we go up that high in our out-of-district, in other words, you're shipping kids out. You're not supporting them in the schools. You're not including, you're not creating an environment that students can feel like they are part of the system. Your self-contained classrooms are not doing their job. You know, is Ken a Lister Academy, which I respect. I have sent kids to Lister Academy when I was at Dover 26 years ago. And it was a great place. But can that handle the kids of today? Or do you need to look at another alternative for those kids that have anxiety that are being shipped out and could probably stay in our system if they have the right program? Because every time you ship a child out, you're changing their life. And this is, if you take that alone, that saves you 7 teachers. 7 teachers. You can make a great program for 7 teachers. And you're keeping those kids in the community. You know, and the other thing is the transportation of that. This out of district, the 1,356,000 is only for the programs. It doesn't put into effect the transportation that was up. So you're looking at almost 1.5 million and then some. So I guess I just ask you, because this is not sustainable what you're doing. And I don't think we need to get rid of teachers, but we need to look at the way we're programming for kids. We need to look at the way we're supporting kids. And I'm not talking about the great athletes. I'm talking about all children. And I have a feeling that's not happening. So I would encourage you to look at that. I think you can bring your budget down significantly if you look at some good programming and making sure that you can support all our children in our school. And remember, we can't afford another 6 years to go up another third. Because then we're going to be at around $90 million. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther. Is there, those are the only two on our sheet. Is there anyone else that would like to speak? Is there anyone on Zoom that would like to speak? No. Okay. I hereby close the public hearing and the public comment session. Okay, we will move on. Next, we have a presentation that Zach will introduce for us.
Well, I'll start, and I think Patty can probably can probably take it from there. But this is the start of a series of presentations that we wanted to bring in to help inform the board of activities that were happening in advance of the passage of the strategic plan that are very much in line with the goals of the strategic plan. But we know they are, in many cases, things that unless you have a student who's engaged in some of these programs or some of these things that are going on, they might not be visible. So we thought that it was important to make some of those things visible. So I'll turn it over to Patty to introduce this particular presentation for tonight.
Absolutely, thank you. So we have with us tonight the three esteemed principals of the elementary schools. We've got Kate Callahan, Joanne Simons, and Erin Lawson, who are here to talk about the revitalization of PLCs, also known as professional learning communities, a catchphrase that gets thrown around an awful lot, but we are taking PLCs very seriously and doing them as they truly should be done, and started this work, I think, probably about 2 years ago to really bring everybody back to a clear understanding and really get ourselves realigned with that. And with that, I'll turn it over to Joanne.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Joanne Simons, and I am the very lucky principal of New Franklin Elementary School. I am so excited to be here with my amazing counterparts, Kate Callahan and Erin Lawson from Dondero and Little Harbor, and we're going to be sharing a little bit with you tonight about the work we've been doing around a term that you may hear us use quite a bit, PLCs, or professional learning communities. Now, professional learning communities have been a part of the culture at the elementary levels for over 17 years. When Patty talks about the last 2 years, it's been a really wonderful opportunity for us to go really deeper in our practice. And so we have a presentation for you this evening. I'm not sure, Patty, are you the controller of all things?
I can pull that up. I can certainly do that. Hang on.
So just so we'll get you on the first page of our presentation, we just wanted to start off with a quote that the three of us felt was kind of a great jumping off point. One of the pieces that I'll actually just ask you just to notice when the quote goes up or you have the presentation in front of you are the names below are Dufour, Eaker, Manny, and Matos. And we have been very, very lucky in our time here at Portsmouth to have worked with really some of the foundational members of this professional learning community's work. And so what I will say is that collaboration has long been a part of what we do at the elementary level. And I'm not just talking about collaboration around let's get together teammates and plan a field trip. I'm talking about through a professional learning community that we're talking about collaboration in a very student-centered, data-driven, decision-making approach. So when we're talking about times for professional learning communities, we're talking about our teacher teams coming together on a weekly basis to dig into curriculum, to dig into student learning, to share practices that are working well and to adjust when it's not. And in a little while, I'm going to introduce you to my counterparts and they're going to dig a little bit deeper into that. 2 years ago, Patty mentioned, we took this opportunity to kind of reflect on where we were in our PLC work. It had looked a little bit different across the three elementary schools. And we took pause and we reached out to Patty and Zach and we said we knew we were at a crossroads. We knew that a great deal of district work was starting to begin around the strategic plan. And as the elementaries, we're the foundation that's building up. And so we were ready to take our work into a deeper practice. And so 2 summers ago, there were groups of us from New Franklin and Don Darrow who went to San Antonio, Texas for a PLC Institute, a Professional Learning Communities Institute. It was days filled with great professional learning, but what was even better was what would happen afterwards. Teachers stayed together and talked about this work. The same thing happened with Erin and her team. She sent a large team, I believe, to Salt Lake City. Again, this work is empowering teachers, and a big part of going deeper in this work wasn't simply that we as the school administrators talked about the importance of this work. It was building what we're calling our guiding coalitions, teacher leaders that were coming back into our buildings and working with their teammates, leading this charge, and really collaborating closely with the administrators in terms of what we needed to do to support them. I think that's a huge piece in our work at the elementary level and beyond here in Portsmouth, is you have, and as somebody who's been in this district for 19 years, I can say you have some of the smartest teachers around. And what is really so powerful is when they come together with a common purpose, and they come together and they're focused on student learning. A big piece of being a professional learning community is not just that these children are learning and this group of children is learning something different. It is all children are learning a guaranteed and viable curriculum. So important to the work of professional learning communities. So what I wanted to share with you is that at the core, it's very structured. We meet, I can speak specific to New Franklin, but on Wednesday afternoons, when you walk into New Franklin Elementary School, you will be seeing teacher teams across the building. There aren't people in the hallway. There's no one at a copy machine. There's no one on a phone setting up a parent meeting. On Wednesday afternoon, starting from 2:30 to 3:15 and typically till 3:30, teacher teams are reflecting on practice and they're analyzing data and they're talking about what happens during the next week for our students, what happens for the next week in our instruction in our classroom. And those existing systems happen in our other buildings as well. What's a huge piece of it is this problem-solving approach. If things aren't working, how are we fixing it? If things aren't working instruction-wise, a big piece of this is what are teachers doing differently? How are we changing our practice? But it's also like, we've got this group of kids that are just really struggling. Let's put heads together and let's problem solve together around it. When I'm talking about teacher teams, I actually should correct myself. They're educator teams. And we have classroom teachers, special educators joining their classroom teachers on that same team. We have interventionists, literacy tutors. We have quite a few of our paraeducators who also happen to be certified teachers. We're very lucky, again, with the high quality of staff in our district. And they come around the table and they're working on those teams. So that's just a little bit of a brief 101 before we get started. But we're looking at slide number 2. This is a really important slide because we want everyone to see not only are your elementary teachers working hard and they're driven around the student work, but our work is really tied to the strategic plan that you've adopted and that Patty and Zach have led our administrative team, our educators from across the district to talk about what is important to us as a system. And these professional learning communities tie right into this. So in particular, I would say we talk about focus area 1, which is that rigorous and aligned K-12 curriculum. I'm going to give you a little teaser here with this. So in terms of thinking about curriculum, we've been working, and you may have seen in some of our newsletters or in some of Zach's information at the elementary level, we have been talking about essential standards. The standards we are asked to teach as educators, and this is across the board, especially at the elementary level, it's a beast. You know, here are all the things you need to cover. What we've been doing is talking about what's essential. If I'm a second grade teacher, what is it I want every single first grader to come into second grade with? If I'm in fifth, What is it I want every fourth grader to leave? And so we have said these are the essentials that we're all working together around to make sure that every child is working towards mastery of those. That's a heavy lift sometimes. So a rigorous and aligned K-12 curriculum. When we come back to meet with you with Stacy Weeks, our elementary curriculum coordinator, she's going to talk about that work because it's been, as I said, a heavy lift with our teacher teams, but a powerful lift because we have teachers from across the 3 buildings collaborating around curriculum, collaborating around assessments and expectations, which I think is going to have such power as those kids move up into the middle school. The other piece, the other area I wanted to share with you is that area 2, which is huge, that building educator capacity. I mentioned to you those guiding coalitions. A huge piece of this professional learning community work isn't just tied to analyzing data around student learning. It's also teachers coming together, at times being really vulnerable, and that's a big part of this collaborative process, of saying, how can I improve my practice? What suggestions do you have, peers, that can help me be the very best teacher I am for every single one of my students? That is really powerful. Another piece of that is, I mentioned to you, those guiding coalitions. We each have teacher teams within our buildings that are helping to guide the work, helping to guide us as administrators, and that is directly tied to that focus area too, in terms of building educator capacity. There's power in this work. And I will say that at times it's really tiring, heavy, and hard work, but teachers are committed because they see the power in it. They see that students are being successful. They see their own professional practice improving. So that's just a little bit, that's my little kickoff here to this really wonderful presentation around professional learning communities, or PLCs, as you'll hear us refer to them. And now I have the great privilege of introducing you to the fabulous Erin Lawson from Little Harbor, who's going to share a little bit more. Thank you.
Fabulous, esteemed. This is all going to go to my head. I mean, really. But truly, I think as we talk tonight, part of this, just to remind you, is in answer to some of the things that came out in strategic plan of what are you doing at the elementary level that supports this work? And PLCs kept being our answer, and it's not just a platitude. I think that as we talk about PLC, one of the shifts that has been really huge is that we've been having PLC meetings for a long time. As Joanne said, we've been doing this work across the district for about 17 years. Few people had been trained. We're bringing things back. We were doing what the experts would now call PLC light. We were having meetings, we were looking at data, we were having conversations about planning, we were making curricular decisions together. We were working cooperatively, but not necessarily collaboratively for the good of all students. So one of the big shifts is that PLC is not a meeting, PLC is a way of being. And so it is how we function within the school. And this year, one of our biggest pushes is to make sure that it's not just how we function as individual schools, but that our work is going across the 3 elementary schools. So despite the fact that there may be students who are sitting in a different 3rd grade classroom in a different building, the essential standards that they're being taught are the same. And a lot of the practices, they're benefiting from the whole. So that some of the work we might be doing might be in teacher teams of 2 or 3 or maybe 4 educators sitting together. There's other work that's happening that might be 15 3rd grade experts sitting around and talking about that content. So when we're talking about the PLC ideas, kind of what drives these conversations, it truly is these 3 big ideas. So when you talk PLC, you're going to hear about a focus on learning. And that's not a surprise. We're educators. We often are focused on learning. But many of our conversations are actually focused more on teaching than on learning until we started to really practice this. So that it's not about what's your plan for tomorrow. It's not about who got it, who didn't, and how are we going to respond. But it truly is making sure that we're looking at the student outcome and the student learning as we're planning, as we're responding, and as we're gathering evidence of that learning. The other piece is that collaborative culture. and collective responsibility. And what we mean by that is it's not my kids because they're sitting in my classroom. It's our kids because they're in our grade. It's sometimes our kids because they're in our building. And certainly there's certain things that need to be our kids because it's part of our district. That as we think about all students and we think about what is essential for kids to learn, we want that to be regardless of whose classroom you're in. One of the best takeaways for me from going to the conference was the idea of there's no teacher lottery. So it's not, oh my gosh, how lucky are you to have her because she is a phenomenal teacher. And next year, maybe you'll make up for the teacher you have. It truly is that every student is getting the best education they can, and that it's not just based on that person's expertise and demeanor, but also the expertise of their colleagues. So that collective efficacy is something that really goes into what John Hattie talks about. Visible learning. It's a name that you'll hear, and one of the greatest predictors of student success is teacher efficacy. And what that means is that teachers who are willing to ebb and flow, teachers who are willing to shift their practice, and teachers who work collaboratively together to be their best effective self. So that it's not just somebody who is a practiced educator who has taught this lesson and knows it inside and out, but it's also somebody who's willing to say, you know what, I've been doing this in this way, and most of the time it works. It didn't today. It didn't this week. There's something that these kids need that's different, and I'm willing to dig into that and find it. So that that's where it goes back to that focus on the learning that's happening on a day-to-day basis, on a week-to-week basis, on a year-to-year basis, that we're really committing to making sure that students are demonstrating that growth. That also goes into that idea of being results-oriented, that what we want is for students to be showing mastery. When they're not showing mastery, we're looking for growth towards proficiency. And so that really has looked at our processes so that we are not just thinking about students and how to respond to that student, but we're looking at systems that can be sustainable and replicated, so that it's not just the fact that you are in a class that does well, and so you have the bonus of student learning from your colleagues or your peers, but that there is this piece that all students are going to learn. We're going to work on that together and really being reflective on that. So that focus area 2 in our strategic plan that talks about fostering a culture of reflection, PLC is doing that. PLC is being that reflective teacher when you're in the classroom, when you're looking at data afterwards, and when you're planning to move forward. So that truly is, I know that focus area, sometimes we focus only on reflection or only on kind of evaluation. And to me, it's so much more than that. I can give feedback to a teacher, but it's so much more powerful if they're empowered to make a change or make a shift because they see what it's going to do for the students in front of them. So these are the 3 big ideas that kind of foster all of the conversations. And Kate's going to get into some of the essential questions. But the next part of this, in terms of foundational beliefs, are what the PLC experts will call the 4 pillars. And so a mission, vision, values, and goals. The way I like to think of this is that the work of the teams is really to focus on those 3 big ideas. The organization really needs to make sure that they're focused on these 4 pillars. This is like the foundation of a PLC, that we need to anchor ourselves in a common mission that is often going to refer to something like collaborative practice and student outcome. You're going to look at your vision, so giving you direction as to where you want to go. You're going to make sure that that's anchored in your values. What are you committing to as a group of teachers, as a team? And how are you establishing those priorities? So these might look a little bit different at each school or sometimes in different teams that need different priorities, but it's helping us to anchor our work so that we're looking at these things as we have common values and understanding that guide our work. Without that, we can sometimes have splinters. And what you might know about teachers is we're kind of control freaks. And it's really nice to be able to sit in your room and say, I control this part. I know how to respond to this piece of things. I know what to do when I'm teaching this content. And when you're asking teachers to open their doors, as Joanne used that word vulnerable, you're asking teachers to not only open their doors in their grade books, but also their minds to share that information with others. It's a much harder practice, and yet there is a lot of benefit in the end for us to be working smarter, not harder, because we can learn from one another, we can benefit from one another's experience, and we can really be thoughtful and plan together in a way that puts more heads together to problem solve. Having systems that support that make the work something that you're not creating time and time again. And so there's pieces of this that are kind of the day-to-day work. There's pieces of this that have been systemic shifts. And then there's pieces of this which is grounding ourselves in the philosophies of PLC. I'm going to turn it over to Kate.
So you've heard the words vulnerability, you've heard the words collaboration, you've heard the words reflective. A big piece of our PLC meetings that we do, as Joanne shared, weekly, are really answering those 4 critical questions of a PLC. And what's important to know about those are those questions are engaging us in action-oriented inquiry. So teachers have to pause to reflect upon their practice as they dissect the student outcomes. And what's important through this is that these 4 questions are part of that practice on a weekly basis. And so when you're looking at student outcomes, it could be classroom observations, it could be what we'll call common formative assessments, it could be student feedback through a conversation at a morning meeting. We're always coming back to answering these questions. So the first question that we have is, what do we want students to learn? And what's important about this, as Joanne used the word, viable curriculum. And so this year we have spent a great deal of time of looking at and defining those essential standards in the area of math. And so a big piece of what that has helped teachers do is really determine what are those essential standards that every student needs to master. And what are those standards that we as educators need to do to look differently about our practice to ensure that those outcomes are happening. We also talk a lot about looking at the readiness for how we're going to move forward in with content. And so we need to pause. Do we need to go back and reteach? Do we need to look at our groups and say to our cohort, we're going to take a little bit of time of extending for some of these students. And maybe those students are going to go into a different classroom, or maybe we're going to go backwards to go forward because we know that next unit and those next essential standards we need to backfill to continue. And again, the focus is on all students. So our intent is that we're moving at a pace where we're bringing everyone along with us. Question number 2 is, how do we know if they've learned it? And so that's looking at a balanced assessment system. And I want to be really clear that a balanced assessment system isn't one data point. Years ago, we spent a lot of time coming to data meetings and saying, oh, this student isn't learning because of X, Y, and Z, or this student is really excelling. And many times we had one data point. What's critical about a PLC and leaning into those conversations is looking at, there's 4. Patty, can you go ahead to slide 2 slides? Of looking at different assessments. So there's classroom assessments. What are we doing on those day-to-day assessments? How are we using exit tickets to determine if a student's understanding the concept that we're teaching? How are we using a whiteboard when we're doing problem-solving skills that there's no words but just a student showing their work on a whiteboard at a circle? A big piece this year as well is those common formative assessments, and really spending time to go deeper in determining those essential standards, but what assessments are going to be our takeaways to reflect upon our practice and to know that students are making the growth that is needed and required. And so part of the work that Joanne alluded to is happening in a few weeks that we'll share with you is teams coming together at the 3 elementary schools and having a database of common assessments per those math units and sharing what has worked, what hasn't worked. I just recently sat on a team, and what they thought was going to be a great common formative assessment was something that they got no data from that really propelled them in a different direction. It was flat. It was more multiple choice than a student being able to show their work and to show their thinking. There was no strategies that we could engage with. And so common formative assessments has been a heart of a lot of the work that we've done this year. And as hard as it is, it's been also extremely rewarding. And what we've noticed is those barriers around protecting our own students within our own space have really been pushed aside. And what we're now seeing is teachers leaning into one another to say, hey, how are you doing X, Y, and Z? Or, wow, my students really didn't do a great job. Can you show me what this looks like? And those assessments are really driving those conversations. Obviously, we have interim benchmark assessments that we've collected over the several years that I've been here. Is that there's common assessments that we have within each of the interim within each course of the school year that we've used as data points. But again, that was one data point. It wasn't one of the four data points. And then obviously a summative assessment. And the hope is that through those common formative assessments, by the time we get to the summative, we're not surprised. We're not surprised that I'm going to do well or that I might need to struggle. Or we're not surprised that some of our title students are really making that growth because the instruction has been so targeted. Do you want to go on to number 3, Joe?
Thank you. And I'm going to share with you question 3. So we've talked about, we have our guaranteed and viable curriculum. What is it we want our students to know and be able to do? That's where we start. Then we go to how do we know it? And Kate shared with you that assessment journey. And assessments aren't just paper assessments on a test, but so many ways that we look at student learning. And then we move to responding to that information. So question 3 is what do we do if they didn't learn that? And so what we're doing a little bit differently this year than we have in past years around some of this work is really looking at kind of in time, looking at current instructional units, not just saying what is it we think students need to be able to go into this unit, but we're stopping at, I'm going to make this up, but we're in chapter 7 of our Math and Vision program. We're at chapter 7, and what's the essential learning? What is the key learning? Not every page is, every concept within that has the same weight. What's the essentials? How do we assess them? And then now we respond. Here's where we are now. And so we take a look at that. Tier 1, when you see, it used to be, many of you, I know have been on the board before, this used to be flipped and they would call it a pyramid, or, responding to a pyramid. Now it looks more like a candy corn. They've kind of flipped it. But so tier 1 is that essential. That's what every student is being taught. That's your core curriculum. So we've assessed that. We've looked at it. And now we're responding. And this can happen in a variety of ways. One of the things that's been really powerful in some of our buildings is teachers within their classrooms are responding to what now we move to tier 2, that supplemental support, that maybe that opportunity to reteach, maybe that opportunity to reteach or even sometimes pre-teach. We can see that there are some concerns we might have around language as we get ready to go through and helping those kids kind of problem solve too. And teachers are doing that in their classrooms, doing small group support. They're doing that in the middle. They're doing different math stations or literacy stations, and they're doing small groups, and they're providing that in their classrooms. There are also other opportunities where students might be pulled out by small groups with an interventionist or a instructional tutor or a paraeducator that's tied to that. It may be at New Franklin, I can speak again, it looks slightly different, as it should. As it should. Every school needs to reflect the culture, the climate, the people in that building. Within my building, we do have an opportunity for time that we call our intervention block. And so that looks a little different. And so what happens during that time is that those professional learning community teams, again, this is New Franklin, but it looks similar yet different, and that's okay in the other 2 buildings, that all of those people are going in and supporting and breaking those out into small groups. And there might be that opportunity. I said, what will we do if students don't know that? You might have a classroom teacher might be able to support a group of just 3 or 4 students that they know they need to really work on, while another a tutor or another person on that PLC team has a larger group. The special educators have been amazing in this process because they've been able to, when we have our professional learning community meetings, share great strategies. So when we break out in maybe small groups during instruction or during this additional time, support children in Tier 2. Tier 3, those for our students that might need even more time. Oftentimes that Tier 3 support is provided by our incredible group of special educators within our buildings and our interventionists, and those students get even more time, especially if we're talking about tied to those essential skills. So we are responding to our students in real time, which is really important to us to master those concepts we've identified. What I will say is a big piece of that is just the responsiveness. That is so important. So we are not just teaching that particular chapter of Envision, but we are stopping and we're checking student understanding and learning. And we might have to adjust our instruction. We might have to adjust the timing that we had thought. We thought we were going to make it through that chapter and that lesson in 2 days, but no, it's going to take us 3, or maybe it only took us 1. And that's going to lead us to the next question. Question 4, what will we do if they already know it? That's just as important. That's just as important in this process, is we look for ways to extend and enrich learning of our students. We also now in this PLC going deeper, we also look at our own professional practice. How are we at times maybe going deeper in our instruction with our students? But again, looks unique in each building, looks unique depending upon that essential standard. But what we're doing is we're using that assessment data. We're looking at what kids know and are able to do, and we're responding in real time. There are some students that need more, and we're going to provide that for them. There are some students that are ready to go deeper, and we do that too. At New Franklin in 3rd grade, we had some of our students that had mastered a concept, showed that they were secure in that concept. Well, in mathematics, they then went and worked with one of our student teachers and did a whole kind of architectural unit and did to scale drawings. They were doing ratio and percentage. They created second stories on New Franklin, and then they shared them out. You know, it was super cool. We actually had staff bathrooms, and which that's novel at New Franklin. And we had things, you know, like we had these special breakout rooms and all these wonderful creative spaces. But the kids did that and then shared out with their peers, and they were all so excited. Teachers are also, again, what do we do if students know this? Well, then I don't need to spend as much time on this concept. I can move on to the next, or I can take some time to, we've often had times where we've been able to break off and do something a little bit unique, a special project, because we know exactly what we want kids to understand and know and be able to do. And through our assessments, we're able to see where our students are and then reflect on that practice. And with that, I will turn it over to Erin.
Some of you might be thinking, how is this different than what educators do all the time? And truly it's not. I think that it really is, as we said, it's refining our practice in this and really making sure that we're moving from that PLC light to PLC right, that we are anchoring ourselves in common understanding and anchoring our practices so that we are continuing to refine them so that they are something that can be replicated over time. Sustainability is something that we often talk about. And if I am creating lessons by myself in my room, teaching them and putting them in a file drawer. Maybe I'm even sharing that slideshow with my colleague, but they don't have a true understanding of what it is that we're trying to teach. They might tweak my slides, they might borrow them. That's collaboration. And what we really want is or cooperation. What we really want is that collaboration and deeper understanding. So this all takes time. And as we've gone back into this process, I know that going to an institute for PLC, I thought we were doing a pretty good job. I've done a lot of professional reading on PLC, gone to a lot of PLC meetings, but we weren't a PLC as a climate as a culture. If you walked into our school, people would say, PLC, yeah, that's on Mondays. We do that from 3 to 3:30. They might say, oh, our team meets on Thursdays to plan, and then we review our practices on Monday afternoons. But they wouldn't necessarily be able to tell you what it was that they were anchoring in. And now I think they could. I think as we look at this, what we're trying to make sure that we're understanding is that we're looking to build capacity. We want to build capacity in our educators because that is how we're going to improve student outcomes. Our student outcomes are pretty good, but when we're responding individually all of the time, we're putting a lot of effort into what one teacher is doing for one student. What one teacher does for one student might really work. It might benefit 6 students. And so really making sure that we're thinking about our practices so that they're sustainable, so that there's something that can be replicated, and so that when we're working together, we're able to meet more students more effectively and more efficiently. Teachers will always tell you the one thing they wish they had more of is time. There's never enough time in a school day. There's never enough time in a school year. And there are often things that teachers are saying, how do we get to everything we need to get to? And so in looking at this and really making sure that we're honing in on what is essential, what is the have-tos, what are the pieces where we can extend, where can we offer choice, and how can we make sure that we're designing this so that this year's lesson may not look anything like last year's lesson, because I have a different group of kids in front of me. We've got kids coming in with different background knowledge. We've got kids coming in with different needs. And so making sure that we're really being dynamic in that. And so part of that is making sure that in that vulnerability that Joanne had mentioned, there is that idea of making mistakes. Every single teacher probably could name more than one lesson that didn't go as they thought it would. Okay. It might be because kids didn't have what they needed. It might be because it was a lesson that worked really well because of a certain group of children and it didn't work the next time. So learning from those mistakes, what could I do differently? And I don't have to wait till next year. I'm going to wait till tomorrow. I'm going to learn from that tomorrow and respond to that so I can fix what didn't go well. And so I can borrow or work with my colleague to make sure that we're getting the same results. So that if somebody's group is always scoring 90% in foundations and my group is scoring more in the 80s, I can say, talk to me about what you're doing. What are you using that I'm not using? Can I watch you teach it? Can you take my group and have me watch you so that I can watch what my students do when they're in front of you? So having those conversations and building that collective efficacy is really something that we feel like impacts student learning. So a lot of the focus on PLC seems to be on grown-ups. It's on our practices, it's on our teacher time, it's the work that we're doing with teachers. But the outcome that we're looking for is that student support, making sure that what we're doing is meeting students where they are, which was one of the biggest things that we talked about in the strategic plan. How are we supporting the students in our schools? And so PLC is the framework that helps us be able to make sure that we're building practice around that so that we're looking for that outcome of student success. And with that, if you guys have questions, we are willing to take them for a couple minutes.
Thank you very much, all 3 of you. Excellent presentation. Do we have any questions? Lisa?
I don't have a question, but just a comment. I just really want to thank you for coming tonight. And I mean, I serve on the Curriculum and Teaching and Learning Committee, and I still learn a lot from listening to you, so I'm just really happy to hear this. And I think I just want to voice, I know you are not here directly to speak about the budget, but when we get to that conversation later, what I'm hearing from what you're saying is the amount of time and sort of staff resources that are going into all of this work so that kids can have a better experience. And I want to really make sure that we don't lose the narrative on that later in the evening, because I would hate to pull away resources to continue this work. You know, it does seem really aligned with the strategic plan that our community put a lot of effort into contributing to be able to make every kid have the opportunity for that tiered support you're talking about, whether it's that they need a little extra support to catch up or a little extra, you know, challenge to move ahead where they are. And I just don't want to interrupt your work by anything we do with the budget. So that's all I'm going to say. No questions, but thank you.
Carrie?
Also, just a comment. You don't have to. I feel bad. You're standing there for the comment.
I'm like, I can sit.
Yeah, make Joanne stand up there. No, I'm just kidding. I think it's interesting having a third grader with like pretty intensive special ed services at New Franklin. It's really interesting to me, the idea of intervention and how I can barely get any information out of the kid anyway. But she will talk about intervention block and just the idea that it's like everyone needs intervention and we're all on the same page and everyone is learning at their different levels. And for her to recognize that, you know, and so early on is just like incredible and so different from the education I remember, you know, and so it just really connects to me with all the social emotional learning because they're learning about learning in that process, and it's just super cool to see for me.
Brian and then Pip.
I actually had some questions, but honestly, I'm in the committee as well, and I think, you know, it's great to see you guys lining up this way and working together. My question is sort of on the light versus, I guess you call it light versus right. So does this take more actual time to do this for the teachers? Like, is this like more of a time commitment? That was one question. And then just what is the, you know, the mood of the teachers when they first were exposed to the right version? Was it, are they embracing it? Do they feel like they're getting something out of it, that they were learning from each other in a way that they didn't before? And then the last one, you did mention a piece that said where opportunities, you mentioned somebody had some assessment at a 90 or versus 80. Do the teachers have the opportunity? Because you mentioned they might have the opportunity to go observe another teacher. Do they have those opportunities, and what does that look like? So I know that's a lot of questions.
Yeah, so I think some of what you're asking, Brian, is what does this look like on a day-to-day basis, right? And so obviously different teams are in different places. And some of that might be because of where they are in terms of their work together. We move teachers move, teacher teams change, that kind of thing. And whenever you're working with a new team of teachers, there's going to be some storming that has to happen, right? There might be some vulnerability that people are not as willing to be there yet. Whereas teachers who have been working together for a long time may be past that. That is not 100% true. We all know teams that can get together and everybody's kind of on the same page and out there. I think one of the points of this practice, in that last slide, it's the teachers learning from mistakes. So it's really that what we try to do is set up a no judgment zone. It's not about who's better at this. It's whose students performed better and why. And so the opportunity to look at data across the grade level on numerous occasions means that rarely are you going to have one teacher who is like excelling in everything and one teacher who's really poor. Now, we've got good teachers. And so when teachers start to see that, they start to dig into that right away. And so it might be that somebody's really good at teaching foundations. And so, yes, we do offer opportunities for people to do some of that. And I know that looks different a little bit at different times. But for instance, I can tell you that we have reading specialists who might say, why don't I teach this lesson and you watch so that you can see what those kids who aren't getting it are doing? Is it because they're not paying attention? Is it because they can't keep up with the pace of it? Is it because they don't know what they're being asked to do? Because sometimes just that back seat gives you more information, right? And sometimes it might be them saying, I really feel like I need to be able to work with my colleague on this. And teacher teams will come up with a way to do that. Sometimes it'll be, Erin, can you cover this class so that I can go in and watch my colleague teach? But often it's, why don't we bring our kids together? I'll teach the lesson, you observe. And so there are definitely teams that are willing to figure some of that out. It might be coming up with ways to be in someone else's classroom while you're both teaching small groups, where you can kind of overhear through osmosis some of that work. And as Joanne mentioned, the use of like our special education team, our interventionists, who are used to doing some of that more intensive kind of specific work as opposed to whole class instruction may be able to offer some of that guidance as well. So it's really setting up teams so that they're willing to have that conversation. And like I said, the ongoing process means that it's not highlighting who's better teacher, it's highlighting who did best in that skill and making sure that there's opportunity for people to share what they have. So does it take more time initially? Absolutely. I would say that our teams are finding that they need to meet more often than they used to because they're making decisions together. Now, what that means is that their time may be used differently, that instead of working at home on their own, they might be staying at school to work together. It might be combining their planning periods so that they're actually using that to work together as opposed to doing what they need to do in their own classroom. So it's been a shift in practice with that. The goal and what any PLC practitioner will tell you is that that teacher efficacy starts to happen and then it will actually lighten the amount of time because you're putting heads together, you're working smarter. So in some places we're there in certain subjects, in other places we're still getting there. But I think that the energy is largely good. I think that each of us has a guiding coalition who really buys into this work, who understands the importance of it, and by and large attended the training themselves. So of course you go to a conference with 20,000 people, you collect some of that energy. But the most amazing thing is that you can bring it back, and we're getting people to feel it even within the schools. And the opportunity to bring our guiding coalitions together to do some of the facilitated work that we'll talk about next time has been really powerful because it's been an opportunity for those leaders of this work and the people who have a common understanding of this work to come together and talk across the schools. So that's been a really great benefit of some of the work that we've done and the way that we can highlight those leaders and use them to help guide this work as well, so that it's not just the three of us. And Stacy's been a large part of this work as well. So, the four of us can stand up and talk about this till we're blue in the face. But in order to get buy-in, we have to have people that are doing this work alongside their colleagues.
Great. Thank you.
Well, first I'm wondering if I can send my 2 high schoolers back to because I'd like them to do it again in that environment. So, but I'm really pleased to hear that you guys have made this a focus because it sounds like it's just what not only the teachers need but what the students need. So that's always a great thing. And I think you actually answered most of my questions. I was going to ask about teacher buy-in, and it sounds like it's mostly there, so that's good.
I think
and then,
Can I just add to that?
Oh, yeah,
I think
please.
a big piece is as we shifted, and when we all went to the institutes, when we shifted our thinking and our mindset as to the why behind it, the buy-in just was there because the outcomes were there. And so teachers felt, especially through the Guiding Coalition, because at least for Dundera, there was somebody from each grade level who went to San Antonio, plus case management. And so the work wasn't about Kate's work, it became their colleagues. And so leaning into one another as a support system, that vulnerability just became the norm. And so some of that was, we're seeing these outcomes happening, we're engaging in these conversations, we're using those 4 questions to guide our practice and our thinking. It's not willy-nilly, oh, let's pull this out and let's do this. And so that became that repetitive practice. And so like Erin shared, most of my teams are having, we do PLCs every Thursday. It's 2:30 to 3:30, many go after, but throughout the course of a school day, unified art teams are teams just together. Lunchtime becomes teams coming together to continue a conversation. And so I feel like, yes, there's time, and we're always chasing time, but it doesn't feel like a burden because we're watching what's in front of us, we're reflecting upon what we're doing every day, and it's actually making our job easier. And then from an outside perspective, those interventionists from reading or math or title, they're finding creative ways to support teachers. So when I think about my first grade team, as a cohort of just say 60 students for an average number, they're looking at data, they're then using each other as a resource to say, you know what, how can I teach a little bit differently? And so now we've created these systems where students are shifting within classrooms, so they're with different teachers than their home-based teacher, and they're engaging in small group instruction after a focus lesson, and that rotates. So maybe you're sick and tired of hearing my voice and I'm not seeing those outcomes, so I'm going to pass it on to Erin and regroup. And so all of a sudden this data is going up and we're closing that gap. And it's not just about those students in Tier 1, but it's all students. So a case manager's coming in, there might be a student who's not identified, but they're going to work right alongside because they just might need that extra boost. And so I think that's a big piece of this process that we alluded to, but to really see in action, and you're all welcome to come in and observe, it's really powerful.
Yeah, that's great. I know there's been a bunch of talk over the years that I've been here about sort of those kids who aren't identified yet or at all, but still need a little extra support, and sort of those sort of falling through the gap because they don't have the IEPs or 504s.
They might not have a learning disability. They might have need specialized instruction. They just need that support, that repetition, a different way of looking at something. Maybe it's more hands-on. Maybe it's more concrete. Maybe it's a pace that just has to go at a slower pace than a student sitting next to them.
My other question had been about whether the PLCs work across the schools, but it sounds like it's I don't remember what you called them, the guiding
Coalition guiding.
Who do that, and then you bring those back to your own schools.
I think that's our greatest. I think the three of us. And with Stacy, I think that's really been the greatest success for this year. When I think about just where we are, for many years it was 3 schools trying to come together, and the essential standard work has really brought us together. And teams, I'd say 2 or 3 years ago, were hesitant to come and show vulnerability or engage in conversations, and now tomorrow we're all coming together. Everyone's coming to Dondero. It's okay. We're just doing this, engaging, sharing ideas. There's Google Drives that they can access. And so it's really celebratory. And there's some teams who sit far longer than you would have thought they would ever sit together. And looking at, wow, what can I learn from, Erin's 4th grade team, or wow, look at, Joanne's 5th grade team. And I think the focus has been math, but you're starting to really feel that spread around the other content areas. So it's great.
It is.
Oh, good segue. Thank you guys for being here tonight. Talking about spread around other content areas, I guess I was curious, and I'm not trying to get off topic by bringing this up, but I'm curious. You were talking about the learning outcomes. I guess I was wondering if the PLCs have helped sort of absorb the outdoor education position, or sort of talk within the PLCs. I think that's how outdoor education had kind of started. It was you teachers were sharing with each other. And so I guess I wondered if somebody could talk maybe briefly about, any of the outdoor ed piece, or integrating outdoor education within what the goals are that you're meeting. Are the PLCs helping to achieve some of that or whatnot?
Sure.
So I'll have Kate jump in with the outdoor education piece, but coming back to where we started around that essential question of what we want students to know and be able to do, what is essential in student learning, we have really primarily done our focus around this work with assessment and responding to what kids know and are able to do. How do we support kids who haven't quite made it there, and how do we extend? The main focus of that work has really been around literacy and math, because we're, as we said, we're really reflecting on our professional practice in some content areas, and we're looking at student data. That work around the outdoor education piece that you mentioned, which I know is a passion project for many, and is such, those pieces have really been driven by some of our outdoor nature ambassadors and some of the work within our own building. And so I'll segue to the other two who can share a little bit. That work is still happening. I wouldn't, from my perspective, again, it looks different in each building perhaps, but our main driving factors around literacy and math with our professional learning community work.
And I would just say from here, from the table, I wouldn't expect that professional learning communities were a vehicle for bring back anything that was lost as we lost that position. My expectation would be that exactly what you're talking about, the kind of the core subject areas the foundational work that we're trying to do for kids to build them up, to move up through the system, that's where the focus is. That's
Yeah,
what
and I guess I don't say it just particularly for the position, but like, I guess I'm curious about like science and whatnot too, but I think it was helpful to sort of hear that the main focus is, you know, these core content areas. I don't know, obviously, as these things progress, maybe there would be opportunities for expansion, or is it, you know, really just confined to meeting, you know, goals within those areas?
Yeah, and I think it would be outside of PLC to have those conversations, Liz, but I do hear your conversation around what about science and social studies, where some of those more immersive kind of things. And what I'll say is that right now I think that that's not our focus in PLC. Okay. It's not where we're collecting evidence of learning to reflect on together. We have to have focuses, but I think that as a practice, as a PLC looks at student learning, they are looking at things like, how do we create engaging lessons? You know, and so that engagement might be a piece of an integration of a science unit and a writing unit, or a science unit and a math unit, or a social studies unit and a reading nonfiction unit. And so when they're having some of those conversations around planning and what is the way to get kids to come to this learning, some of that might naturally happen, but it is not a focus of the conversations at this point.
Okay, anyone else?
I was just going to say, in terms of, and I think Lisa started to pull this thread a little bit around, we did not plan this group to come on a night when we were going to be dealing with some of the questions we were dealing, but I think it's good. Because of budget. I mean, this was not necessarily the plan that they were going to arrive on this, but it does really, I think, crystallizes some things around the importance of the decisions that you make at the table. When I think about schools that I've been in that I would characterize as struggling or trying to find their way, they tend to be places where doors are closed and people are not working together. Teachers are working as private practitioners. I'll do the best I can for the kids in my room. There is not a sense that folks can be the things that each of these three talked about: vulnerable, having the door open, sharing with colleagues, being able to say, I don't know that I nailed this one today. Can you help me out in some way? That's really challenging for humans. It's challenging within hallways in buildings, never mind across elementary schools. And what you'll see now is you'll see groups, all the K-5 people together, going through common learning, common experiences, testing the waters around this type of stuff. But what they're talking about now only happens when you make investments in helping make this happen. So you made investments around, they were just talking about the importance of taking each of these kind of guiding teams to other places to do intensive training that was then going to inform everything else in the building. That wasn't free. That cost some bucks to be able to put people in that position. The opportunity to give them ongoing professional development time where they're working together, and they're working together in cases with specialists that we're bringing in from the outside who think really deeply about these issues. So that's huge. The time commitment that's needed from staff, those are investments you make when we're going through collective bargaining processes where we're talking about, here's the amount of time that we're willing to pay for the student contact time, but we're also paying teachers for time outside of that period of time because this other work they do is valuable and informs what happens with kids. It's also about, investment in talent. And bringing in talented folks. People mentioned that you have some very talented staff who work for you. We pay at a rate that attracts people, and we have, in the nature of the way in which our schools are set up, we're attractive for our pay. We're attractive for what the quality of the work environment that we have. We are a place that people want to come to, and we're able to attract top professionals. We also made decisions around things like Stacy Weeks, who's not here, who's the assistant principal for curriculum instruction at the elementary level, does a lot of, well, these guys are day to day dealing with all the things you have to deal with as principals. It's Stacy who very often is doing a lot of the building towards these types of things that we're doing in connection to training and kind of being the collective, the glue that holds a lot of this together. That would be really difficult if we didn't invest in someone like Stacy. You've invested as a community in interventionists, so that I think some of what we were alluding to on this side of the table, which was you don't necessarily have to get into special education to get the help you need. So if we did not fund interventionists in buildings to be able to step in, if the only route you had to get interventions, any type of secondary help, was special education, we would wait for you, and I've been in districts that are less funded, where we would wait for you to fail at a far enough level that then we'll put you into special education because we can receive some reimbursement. But we've waited 18 months, 6 months, whatever it is, for you to go through that process. Here, we don't have to do that because people are having conversations, and whether or not you're identified, you're getting some of the help that you might need in a really responsive way. And last, you've got really talented principals. You've got people who are committed to being here, who work really, really hard, are very smart, thoughtful people. I mean, I know it's hard sometimes when we bring these guys in, any of our staff, and they start talking in depth about the work we do. It's complicated work, and they're unbelievably knowledgeable about how kids learn, about about putting together teams of people, how human beings work, how we structure days and time, and how you work with parents, all these types of things. So we're unbelievably lucky to have the very talented leaders that we have as well. All those things come back to investments. And for your core functions at this level, the things you have the most responsibility over are policy, supervising this guy, and creating a budget that ultimately lead to the outcomes that you think are the outcomes you want for the students in the community. So, we didn't set this up on purpose, but it really blends well into having a conversation about what you want to do in relation to budgetary stuff.
Okay, well, thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Appreciate your time. And we will move on. The next item on the agenda is the principal's report. So Zach, I'll hand it over to you.
Let's see.
Overnight field trips.
You mean you just have the usual notifications
Right.
on both
The field trips.
on the field trips and on
support me, right?
yeah, and the email summary stuff. So nothing.
Okay.
I know how you don't like surprises.
Go ahead, Carrie.
I've gotten a few questions. Can you put out something about the final school date?
I can't.
Even if it's a if then what sort of thing?
So currently, I mean, based on snow days, we'd be the day after. We'd be the 20th.
Okay.
So we'd be after Juneteenth. So.
That should come from you, not me.
Yeah, I think I can do that. So especially now that hopefully we're out of snow season. Although March is usually good for one.
That would be
one
students.
surprise one in here. So
Zach, I know I actually brought this up previously and requested it before it kind of became a public comment on a Facebook group recently. But I also was wondering if you could expand on the idea of the half day. I think last year we took instead of having a half day for the last day, we had a whole day to make up for the extra day. And so I know you had mentioned it, but I don't know if you could expand on that at all, if that would be an opportunity.
So I think if how about I do this in a very, maybe the next meeting that we have, I hear the roots of the question, which is do we have to go beyond, do we have to hit Juneteenth and then come back for one day thereafter? And it feels like, that there's a growing constituency who would love not to do that. So I can come back with some discussion about alternatives to that possibility.
I think the constituency is we're not going to come,
Yeah.
potentially and hypothetically. So what's the alternative plan for people that may already be not in Portsmouth by the 20th?
Gotcha.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Now we go into the Piedras here to assist us of the evening, our budget. I didn't say that right. We all got the memo late this afternoon from Zach, which was a very thoughtful analysis of three possibilities for our budget. And it looks like, if everybody agrees, that we're not going to be able to vote tonight on our budget. We'll have to set up another meeting in the very near future because we need to get this accomplished very soon to submit to our city manager. But we really need to give the public 24 hours notice of the memo, the recent memo that Zach put out. So we really shouldn't vote on it tonight. We should wait, let the 24 hours elapse, set a meeting, make sure it's posted for 24 hours so the public can come and weigh in. So, you know, it's been an interesting budget season, and this just adds another nail. But it's the way we have to do it, and we want to make sure we're compliant, that we're meeting the expectations of our public and our city council, our city manager, our superintendent. So, I guess I'll turn it over to Zach. If you could review the three scenarios you have.
Probably what's the best thing to do is I've got a few slides where we could, for as we post it for an upcoming meeting, could kind of preview what is it's a 20-something page document, but this will give the overarching kind of 30,000 foot view of what's in there, and then what won't be covered as part of this set of quick slides will be a lot of the detailed rationale as to decision making in each of these different scenarios that has come from a lot of collaboration amongst principals and leadership at central office. So I'll work you through these few slides, and then we'll post it for the next meeting. People have an opportunity to go in detail and look through what we're talking about. Let me pull it up real quick.
Just as a point,
Yes, Carrie.
is a motion to suspend the rules to consider it a possibility, or?
I think you can't suspend the rules to change the the 24-hour expectation around the posting of a thing. So,
I mean, I think part of it is just that most of these pieces have been discussed, and it's the report that's different. And I know there's some nuance to that, but okay, thank you.
I'm just going to share my screen real quick.
Yep, you should be good. I want to thank Zach for putting together such a concise and easy to understand presentation of three different scenarios that we can consider and discuss and vote on.
Agreed. Second.
Okay.
All in favor?
So again, this will be in the packet for the next session as soon as we set that date. And it's a much more thorough document. This is a quick summary of that document. So in thinking about coming out of your last meeting, we had talked about the work that had been done in discussions with the city manager in trying to forecast what would happen once your budget proposal left here and went through the manager and then ultimately to the city council. And we talked about buyouts and the fact that we had 11 buyouts, and we had a discussion about a couple of different, about really kind of one conversation. And it was I'll say a robust conversation. And so we talked for quite a while, and I think definitely heard the concerns amongst what I would say was a majority of the board around making sure that folks felt comfortable that we were properly investing in the schools that we have as we're making decisions connected to the path forward in terms of budget. So what I kind of working with staff, we developed three kind of thinking frames for you about how to think about a way forward as maybe building blocks for some final decisions. And the three frames were effectively a 2.9%, 2.9% increase from FY25, but one that would not incorporate, CBA adjustments that might come out of this negotiating session. What I'm going to call, I'll put it in quotes because it's not a complete, but a reallocation of the buyout positions, and then a more targeted reallocation, which was not as many positions being reallocated in a way that might pursue strategic goals. So in all these frames, there are multiple positions that we would rehire from the buyout list based on need. We don't think there's any question about these 5, and the 5th is an addition from what we had talked about the last meeting. So high school, we have 1.6 FTEs of high school nursing. At the moment, we had one of the folks who took the buyout was our full-time high school nurse. We feel it's appropriate to replace that position based on need. Same thing with the high school special educator position. I think the caseload's more than make it responsible for us to replace that position. Our JLA is built around 4 core special educators who focus in particular areas. One of the folks who was departing was someone who was working specifically around English. We had multiple world language positions that were gone. This one would have been listed as the Italian position, but really not filling exactly for Italian. We would be looking to hire a world language position, which would be dual certified. And ideally, that dual certification would be in Italian and in French in order to cover our needs. And then the last is taking one of the, hanging on to one of the classroom teachers who took the buyout, hanging on to that position. So in the first of those three ways of thinking about it, pretty much reflects most of the conversation, the core of the conversation that we had the last time that we met. The financial snapshots of this proposal would be that it would move it to just short of $66 million. It's a 2.89% increase over fiscal year 25. This would include reductions in the following positions: a high school math position, a high school yoga computer teacher, high school architecture teacher, the wellness coordinator, middle school tech education teacher, a high school counselor, a French teacher, and 1 classroom teacher. Amongst all those positions, there's only 1 position that would include an actual layoff. All the other positions are now unoccupied as a result of the buyouts, and that one we had heard from that individual at the last meeting. The quick advantages of going something, of thinking about things along this approach, I think it creates a high probability of passage. This fits within the confines of the guidance that the council gave the manager. I think it puts the manager in a good position to be able to hit the overall target provided to the city. The high probability of passage means that you will probably have, in a scenario like this, you'd have the maximum amount of control over the final outcome. Because it's going to hit some of those targets, there's high probability that whatever you send forward will be what we end up spending. So that if that's something that is appealing, this is something that leads you in that direction. The disadvantage to this one, obviously, is there's an opportunity if we were to repurpose some of the roles that we're not rehiring. There's an opportunity to take some significant steps towards some of the strategic goals we laid out through our strategic planning process, and we might be able to in some cases meet, in other cases accelerate beyond our initial timeline. So I'll put this again in quotes. This is the second option, which would be to reallocate many. It's not complete, but it's many of the positions. This would put you at 3.97% increase over the previous fiscal year. This, again, similar to all 3 of these, none of these will include the build-in of potential contractual obligations on the back end of the negotiation processes. The positional impacts in this one is the positions that were listed on option 1 that would be going away would be traded out for these. And I'll just say in parentheses beside each of these positions are either numbers or the word SPED. 1, 2, and 3 all refer to focus areas within the strategic plan, and the belief that do these positions advance one of the core focus areas in the strategic plan. So in the case of the district director of counseling, which we see as a position that would be really a trade out for kind of a spiritual trade out for the wellness coordinator. This would be now giving a position that oversees our core function, the core piece of our organization on the front lines dealing with social emotional wellness and sense of well-being are our counselors. But right now, those counselors effectively in a K-12 setting they work as, again, private practitioners for the most part. So this would be someone that would help coordinate those efforts, and we think that then addresses each of the 3 strategic goals as part of that work. We expand the 0.6 nursing position to a 1.0. We'd be adding 3 paraeducators at Dondero in anticipation of needs, students with needs we're seeing at PEEP. We think there's a strong possibility that as those students transition out of the special ed pre-K into Dondero, that IEPs would require those students to have one-to-ones. And that's true, and it has two impacts. One, it's around making sure that we're providing the appropriate types of programming and intervention for students based on their disabilities. It speaks a little bit to what Ms. Kennedy was saying, where it also we anticipate that it would allow us to hold, as a cluster of students, it would allow us to hold in the district because we would allow them to be with their friends, be in their home schools, and provide a higher level of service as a result of that. Next position down, K-5 intensive needs special educator. Case manager would be in conjunction with those other 3 roles as we try to start to build some in-house programs. We don't have a lot of in-house special education programs at the moment. At the high school, we would move to a design engineering teacher. It's a vision of work that Steve's been working on for quite a while. That will tie together several other threads in the building to create a new pathway for students in design engineering. The kids program is a return to a program. It speaks to students of high need in terms of behavioral and social emotional needs in the middle school, where the middle school is indicating that they had moved away from this program, but they're seeing a intensification of need and a return to that need, and it puts them in a position without in-house programs like this, where sometimes they're in the process of considering out-of-district placements. When if we had a program like this, we'd be able to keep kids in-house. District social worker, this would be going from 1 to 2. Again, moving forward on the wellness portion of focus area 3, and then the maintenance supervisor, which we have talked about on again, off again for the last couple of years through the course of these processes. The advantage to this is that it's an exciting opportunity. If we were to make all those switches, it's a real exciting opportunity to really supercharge our moves towards several of the different strategic goals we're trying to advance. And I know for me, as I was writing it in response to our last conversation, I could sense my own enthusiasm as I was writing about it. Would be, wow, this would be amazing if we could move in this direction. The disadvantage is, the flip side of the other situation I discussed, which is this is, it's not in line with the guidance provided by the council to the manager, and it then becomes less clear if we were to make this type of decision. How different does the final outcome once we get through the city manager and the council? How different does that look like from the day that you pass your final proposal? And then the last option 3 is I just refer to as a target reallocation of buyout positions. This is a bit of splitting the difference. This puts us at 3.4% increase over fiscal year 2025, and it swaps out from that same list. It would just swap out these 6 roles in offset to some of the other positions that we saw. I would just say the other thing that we talk about in the memo too is kind of the conversation about the restructuring of curriculum roles. I've had different stakeholders ask questions around how are we structuring these different curricular roles in the district, and can't these things just kind of work themselves out, and can't teachers just do them? And I think part of what we just saw from the presentation we just saw was kind of evidence of the fact that is not the case. These things need to be helped along because teachers are doing a lot of really important work. But trying to build these types of structures and opportunities and doing the kind of long-term planning around some of this work is really difficult for teachers to do. What we want them to do is be in those teams, having those conversations. That's where we want their extra time going, growing as professionals, growing as teams. Currently, right now, there's a high school director of curriculum, which is an administrative position. There's a high school teacher who has curriculum coordinator duties at the moment, and there's an elementary assistant principal for curriculum instruction, Stacy Weeks, who we talked about before in the last one. These are all, I want to say close to cost neutral moves. The director of curriculum, our goal, I think, when we talked about in the strategic plan, that one of our goals for this budget season was to make sure that we secured curriculum coordination at Portsmouth Middle School through this budget process. So these are, as I said, I think these are solutions that are pretty close to budget neutral. And you would have the director of curriculum moving out from underneath Steve's umbrella, moving under Patty's, and now stretching down, starting at 7 and running to 12. So there's vertical alignment between those two schools. And then the assistant principal for curriculum instruction would stretch out of the 5th and into the 6th. So you'd have those two existing positions, and those people stretch into the middle school in order to create vertical alignment throughout what we're trying to do. That would come with we would restructure the position of the teacher who's been doing curricular duties and would move her into an administrative capacity, but we think that comes at very minimal cost and is effectively pretty much what we're paying her now. But it would also allow her to be involved in evaluation that she's not able to do now, which again reinforces our goal too, which is building educator capacity. And I think that's it from that overview. So
what is the percentage for that one?
Percentage, there's no, I think we're up, I think combined across all those positions, we're going to be up $1,000. So it's a very minimal impact. That, as I said, is close to a cost neutral solution.
No, but is it 3.4?
That doesn't change anything. That's not a separate.
Okay.
That is a tag on that is separate from the 3 frames that I talked about.
I get it. Okay.
Yeah.
On that last slide that you had.
Yep.
I guess I'm just not grasping it. So you're taking the elementary curriculum coordinator.
Yes.
From K through 5, you're moving them to K through 6.
Yes.
You're taking the high school curriculum director and going from 7 to 9. So you've got
7 to 12.
7 to 12.
7 to 12. I'm sorry.
Yep.
7 through 12.
Yep.
So you're covering that. The assistant principal for curriculum instruction K through 6.
Yes.
What is that?
So that's that person right now is Stacy Weeks, who was a former assistant principal at one of our schools, and then the first year we were here, we reallocated her to try to basically work across the 3 elementary schools around aligning curriculum and pedagogy.
So is that
Existing position, the only difference is, so it totally exists right now, as a K-5 role. Her responsibility would then stretch into 6th grade.
Okay,
So
so
she'll
that-
work with the 6th grade teachers at the middle school,
Perfect, okay, I
keeping
got
that line of things going.
So my other question then is the high school teacher curriculum coordinator becomes administrator.
Yep.
So that is not the 7 through 12, that's not the
So
curriculum.
you have two, Steve will refer to, and we'll talk about the curriculum office at the high school, which is composed of two folks, Shay St. Laurent and Jackie Chisholm. So Shay, right now, currently is a standing administrator, and works in name. I was going to say she works exclusively at the high school, but already she's not. She's really already bleeding over into the middle a bit.
So she's the 7 through 12.
She would then move 7 to 12.
Okay.
Jackie Chisholm, former English teacher, currently on a teacher's contract, doing other duties as assigned, which we can do, and she would stay at the high school, and basically her day-to-day activities would still be rooted in curriculum, but this would also expand her in the ability to do evaluative work at the same time.
So would she be curriculum through K
Nope,
through
would
12?
just be at the high school.
Just at the high school?
And so at the moment, I mean, we've got a particular focus at the high school. When we look at the, and this is not to be overly critical of the high school, but when we look at our kind of where our scores are on state testing and on some outcomes, we tend to rank higher in the elementary grades and in the middle than we do at the high. And so we've got a particular focus on what we're trying to do at the high school to try to kind of bring up what we're doing at the high school for all kids to a level that's more reflective of the other two tiers.
Okay, so that is the reasoning for having two curriculum coordinators there, working with teachers on the new curriculum and things like that.
Yes.
Okay. I was just getting confused at the position.
I understand. The
move.
wording makes it a little pointy. I could have done
Plus-
it.
plus
Could have done
I've
it in a
been up since
graphic.
5, so.
Yeah. Well, I could have done it in a graphic.
Thank you so much for that
You're welcome.
clarification.
Thank you, Tish. Liz?
So I mean, this is a 23-page document, and there's a lot to it, the different proposals. So I do have a few questions. I guess I just want to start off by saying, I do appreciate the thought that's gone into this. I am a little bit concerned of the disadvantages and the advantages that are listed under proposals 1 and 2, because I think it minimizes the need for positions. Like you're talking about, advantage, strategic plan, but you're also talking about the fact that, if we were to just go with proposal 1, we're losing teachers, we're losing a counselor, we're losing, I think Nathan made a great point about, you're losing the architecture program, you're losing a computer teacher, you're losing a counselor. So I think I'm a little bit concerned with that presentation to the public that, the only downside is that we're not meeting our strategic plan goals. I think there's real downsides to losing teachers and positions, and I think Pip had mentioned too, or somebody else on the board did, about how we advocated so much to gain a counselor position. So to pull it back and lose it, and
Sure.
there's a huge disadvantage there. I also I just want to clarify a few things. From all of the proposals that you presented, there's no addition for the requested program aid for CTE, and I'm concerned that that program, it was a program aid for the culinary program. We are a restaurant-heavy community. We need restaurant workers, and also we're turning away kids in that program according to the memo that we've received. And so I guess I'm wondering, with this, amongst the other ones, how you're going to address that. You also have a SPED teacher at Little Harbor that was requested that's not listed. Obviously, we see that there's a special ed coordinator, but just like Don Darrow needs paras, I assume Little Harbor requested a special ed teacher because they needed it. Wondered PMS projector replacements are missing. The instrument specialist is missing, and the memo that we received on the instrument specialist was that it was for teaching percussion, and that our students with every other instrument are receiving lessons, but our percussion students are not receiving lessons, and they need an instructor to do that. My concern is that we had, #1 percussion ensemble in the United States when I was in school, and for many years after, and so we're basically gutted our percussion program. I'm a little disappointed to hear that. And so what does that mean, and what does that look like? Also, there was a request for sister school trips. So I guess as far as the instrument specialists and the Little Harbor teacher, there's a base salary of $134K that is listed. I'm sorry, and maybe you're going to get to this. That's in the district proposed requests memo, number 3 on the agenda in this section. So it's the 134. I guess I'm curious, what is the base salary when you calculate 134? I mean, 134 is a calculation with benefits, but what is the base salary we're looking at when we say the cost is going to be 134?
Brian, you want to take it first?
An average teacher, which is basically a master step 9, it's about $94,000.
So there's the potential, though, that we're going to have a 60,000 or a 70,000 teacher. So it may actually be less than the 134. It could be 110 overall cost. Would you say in these positions? Like, I'm thinking for an music specialist to teach percussion. Could we find somebody for 70 or 80K? Versus 94. So just some ideas, or just to throw out there. I also noticed on page 12 there was an edit under the nurse aspect. There was a repeat on Don Darrow, but I think you did explain that.
It was a repeat. Yeah.
Pretty well. I guess I'm concerned with moving, we're having a lot of admin and oversight and whatnot, but then we're losing boots on the ground, one-on-one interface. I also am a little bit concerned with this idea of the curriculum positions changing to add admin. We heard from the middle school at the strategic plan meeting when we all met together that they were not feeling a need for a curriculum coordinator. Obviously part of the strategic plan, but it was something that the middle school themselves had essentially rejected. And so I'm a little bit concerned with having 2 separate people coming in, one coming up from elementary and kind of trying to change what the 6th grade's doing to meet sort of needs, or what the interplay is, and the confusion around, what about 6th grade to 7th grade? Who meets that interplay? And is that the overall admin? I guess I'm a little bit concerned with, we're cutting teaching positions, yet we're adding in more admin. And I do realize that there is a need for potentially more admin or admin oversight or interface at the high school. But I am a little bit concerned when we're talking about cutting computer or an English teacher or an architecture teacher in those instances. I guess lastly, on proposal 3, are we keeping the it wasn't clear to me. Proposal 3, when I looked at proposal 3, it's essentially proposal 2 less the expansion of the nurse, less the design engineer, less the district social worker, and less the maintenance supervisor. But are we keeping the architecture, the counselor, and the K-5 classroom teacher role in that one? I think you said K-5, yes, but.
So I have a quick question about what we want to do.
Yeah.
Do we want to go deep dive now?
Well,
Or do we want to wait for deep dive? And then 2, if we want to do deep dive, then I know Steve's chomping at the bit to jump in on some of the conversation connected to curriculum coordination. So I don't know what you guys would like to do.
I think we should have a discussion now. We like to adjourn by 10 o'clock. There are other items on the agenda that we can postpone to another meeting. There's nothing urgent. So Yeah, why don't we discuss now? Does everybody agree with that? Should we keep the discussion going and?
I guess I'm
Obviously,
concerned,
we
it's already
cannot-
9.
What?
It's already 9:10, Nancy, and we need to pick a date for what the next meeting is. I'm a little bit concerned that the
All
proposal.
right, why don't we take how many people would like to continue a discussion right now? Raise your hand if you do.
I think we need to have it, but.
Before we jump into
Okay. All right, let's continue the discussion.
I think it's a question. I think Lisa had a question for you.
Oh,
I'm sorry. I'm not trying to cut off the discussion. I would just perhaps like to preferentially discuss the matter of the meeting to vote, because I do not want to be rushing that at 10 o'clock when we're all trying to go home.
okay.
So I think my quick question on that piece is I understand the urgency, and at the same time, I feel like while some of these ideas have been percolating for a long time, these specific positions are big changes for the access to education that kids will have starting next year in some cases. And I think the community should have an opportunity to see it. So I would personally not be in favor of rushing this to be like, let's panic and have a vote in 48 hours. I think it either needs to be on March 25th, or if it has to be sooner, I'd be in favor of next Tuesday if people are available. But I think at least we can pick a date and other people can say whatever they think about it and then discuss, maybe.
Are people available on March 25th? I'm
That's
sorry,
our-
March 18th?
Yeah.
March 18th?
I mean,
Brian's not.
do we
Brian's not.
have to do it before the 25th? I mean, we got our guidance late.
So,
I'm just saying.
sorry, I was here.
Oh,
The April 1st notification.
Okay.
I'll be at a conference.
Okay, how about people, St. Patrick's Day is Monday the 17th. Do people have an objection to St. Patrick's Day?
Tish wasn't available on that.
Oh,
no.
that's
That's
right.
all changed, however, so I can do that now.
You are available on are you not available the
I won't be back till next Thursday.
That was going to be our work session.
20th.
So I held it.
Could you meet on Thursday?
Yeah.
Okay. How about the 20th?
That's the Chamber Music Fest. I don't know if that affects anybody. I think I have that on my calendar for some reason.
Ed?
I'm not available the 20th.
How about this coming Thursday? Is that giving people enough time to look at that? It's posted right now, correct?
No,
No, that's not enough.
absolutely not.
No, I'm not available then either, yeah.
Okay, how about the 25th, our next meeting?
Well, yeah, we'll be here.
Are people available on March 25th?
We'll be
we-
here.
That's our
We have a
meeting.
that night.
Right,
Yeah.
we have a meeting that night, but I just want to make sure everybody can be here. I mean, it's better if we have 100% attendance. Okay, let's do it on the 25th, and we'll make the agenda as light as possible.
Thank you.
Does that work for everyone?
So, and we're going to plan on voting.
Yes, that's,
So I would,
that's to make a
yes,
vote.
and
That's the
not to rush.
expectation.
I would, but the manager's team will be moving along. So, and we'll be jumping on the train as they're rolling down the tracks. So that's not to affect your timeline or what you're doing. I also just want you to be aware they're off and running. So.
Well, it seems to me they could work with the 3.97 increase if we end up with the full, with the greatest increased budget, and that could be their guiding light here for now.
Okay, I know Nathan had his hand up, Kerry.
I mean, I'm sorry, Nancy, I don't think a couple of my questions are answered, though.
Can I just make a suggestion?
Could we have Cap just answer the curriculum questions first?
Yeah.
I feel like that would help the whole board by hearing that.
Okay.
My comment is somewhat similar in that there's 3 sets of documents here. Can we just do one at a time instead of bouncing back and forth between all of them? Which the curriculum piece is covered in that first document on the updated agenda.
Okay, Steve. Enlighten us on the curriculum.
Yes, I am very excited to get an opportunity. So I will address that curriculum piece right away. It's actually critical, and the distinction has to be made clearly. The director of curriculum at the high school was a position that was created a number of years ago, and that is a critical asset because ultimately, and this is something if you look at the end of that document in the admin comparison chart that we submitted, you'll see how org charts are set up at high schools, comparative high schools, and we have full-time teaching department heads. That is a critical distinction and is quite unique. It is not the norm by any stretch. So to have our department heads, as teachers, as department heads, do a lot. But as a full-time teacher, even if you are attempting to do everything right, there's very little time left, right? It's a full-time gig. So the director of curriculum was created to support not only the department heads, but also every teacher in the building with a curriculum-focused person. And I have to say I was very excited because at a high school level, that's also rare. What was missing here in terms of our lean leadership model, which actually I don't know is the right move at all. Actually, I know it's not the right move. So we also didn't have K-12 directors in academics. That's also a norm in schools. So here we have the core function of our reason to be here, teaching and learning, curriculum and instruction, with very little dedicated leadership. None that was coordinating 6-12, K-12 at all, right? A lot of good people working really hard, but without that level of leadership. So when you look at a district that lacks the K-12 academic coordination, you see some of the gaps that are both present in this report and in others. So the director of curriculum at the high school is a critical role and has been instrumental in really elevating all of our services. That includes counseling, special ed, all of it, student services, IEPs, 504s, modifications, accommodations in support of teachers and department heads. The curriculum coordinator was a position that emerged out of a continued need to invest, as we talked about tonight, invest in teaching and learning. Again, with a full-time teaching department head crew, with no K-12 curriculum or academic coordination, I still saw the gaps in our performance, in our student performance. We had no mechanism for onboarding new teacher or mentor teacher programming. So these are some of the functions that operate at that teacher contract coordinator level. Those are very distinct from a director level. Zach mentioned we refer to it as our curriculum office. It is now the go-to place at Portsmouth High School. The line out the door of the curriculum office is pretty constant. And it's an amazing testament to that team's efforts to build the relationships and the supports across every department and every function at the high school. So they are very distinct, and I need to make that very clear. In the process of a restructure or this reallocation of resources, which is part of the conversation we had at the beginning of the night with our guest speakers here, and that being responsible, being creative. So that last slide about a reallocation of 2 existing positions, but giving them the power to coordinate 6-12, which is critical, and then to also elevate that for the high school to lose that director position in service of the district, I am 100% in support of that. It is the right thing to do. It's the right person to do it. But it does leave a space for us. In that comparison chart, you will see that almost every school in that chart, and that's 6 of 12 that I did comparisons on, they're similar enrollments, they're similar demographics, socioeconomics. Many of them have at least 3 administrators, 1 dedicated to academics. So they are called the assistant principal for curriculum instruction or a dean of academics. Those other schools on that list actually have part-time teaching department heads, not full-time teaching department heads. So that means that department head teacher has bandwidth in the workday to actually do and deliver on those service models for their teachers and their curriculum, staffing, budgets, all those things. So that chart becomes really important when you start thinking about this cost-neutral reallocation and reassessment of 2 positions, essentially. They also align with all of the goals, as Zach pointed out, both strategic plan, number 1, number 2. And one of the downfalls of our model right now is that lack of evaluative authority, right? So you enter into a conversation as a colleague, but you don't have the administrative authority to actually lift and change performance in that way. So that comes with added responsibility, but a humongous benefit for our faculty and our community. So those two specifically, I hope that helped. But those are detailed. It is a little nuanced, but it is distinct.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Nathan, you were next, and then Kerry, and then we'll keep going down.
Yes, this was more of a comment than a question, but I think this is similar to, I think, everyone. But when I'm in class and one of my friends starts talking about something that he either has no clue about or he doesn't know the full story, it's like the biggest thing that drives me insane. And I think last meeting there were some aspects of that in my arguments. And I think that's appropriate for me to say at this meeting. As we talk about bringing back positions that were not included in the 2.9, after realizing that either numbers were incorrect or having extensive discussions with other people within the high school. Again, I'm strictly just talking about the high school positions here. The 2.9 actually provides the opportunity for the most growth at the high school moving forward. And that although that contradicts taking away positions, it really provides the high school to go towards a more modern model. And as you said, Dr. McLaughlin, enrollment is a whole beast in of itself to knock into those numbers. But I just want to put that on the record and say that there was a lot of things that I found out over this past week in that 2.9.
You mean
I
3.9, Nathan? Sorry.
No,
Proposal
I mean
2 or
the
proposal
original
1?
Proposal 1,
Okay.
the third table. That proposal is what I am saying as a student, and also I have the most faith that Portsmouth High School will be able to provide the opportunity to its students with that model. So that being said, I would like
So
to.
complete cuts. I just want to be clear, Nathan. Sorry, I don't know if that's what you're saying.
So, for example, the French teacher at the high school. Next year, filling back the Italian and Latin teacher, we will be able to provide the same amount of opportunity towards students in Italian and French. So my argument last week saying that kids won't be able to get to 3 levels of French, that's just incorrect. That's one example. So it's contradicting what I said, but I'm trying to make that clear to you all, that I have faith in that option 1 third table, and that will be a option for us to move forward on.
Do you mean? Oh, sorry. Is that option 3? That's the third table.
No. The third table in option 1 is what illustrates
Page 7.
the
Okay,
cuts.
thank you, Nathan. Thank you, and please speak up more if you want to raise your hand.
Yes.
Okay. Kerry?
I don't really want to follow this brilliance with just a silly little question, but thank you for all of that, Nathan. Can you talk about the evaluative authority that you mentioned? Because finally, as you were saying that very last piece, it dawned on me the changes that are being, and I just want to understand a little more.
Yeah, I think it's just an opportunity. We talk about, we're in discussions with our faculty as part of our supervisory and evaluative roles as administrators. Ultimately, I'm inspired by strategic plan number 2. This is about capacity. Evaluation is only one small part of building capacity. And if we think of it like Skinner's box, it's the inputs that really matter. It's everything our elementary principals talked about. The leadership you saw in those principals, by developing that culture, that professional learning culture, community, that's what comes with that authority of administrative leadership. Colleagues do it all the time. Actually, capacity building, we know by research, is best met by peer-to-peer work, teachers working with teachers. And that's critical. But what's essential, leadership matters. And so it's really hard to nudge in bigger departments. And department heads know this, right? They're colleagues. They're colleagues with their colleagues. They also have another responsibility, a stipended role. But it's very different than the role that we have to play as managers of the building, of the operation. So it changes a lot, I think, in having that authority.
And I think I don't think of it as, so in Jackie's situation, I don't think of it as this provides an additional hammer.
No.
You know, it allows
A lever.
It allows us to have professional conversations where we're giving feedback in a structured way. And I think one of the things that we struggle with as an organization is, and part of the reason why Focus Area 2 is one of our areas, is that we struggle in having a culture of giving ongoing professional feedback. But part of that culture is not there because we don't have some of the mechanisms and the number of people to actually do those things in a calm and thoughtful manner. And so I think that's, for us, to have just another set of feet who's going to be able to officially have those types of dialogues, I think is super valuable.
Yeah, and I'll add to that specifically. It really comes from our faculty, our staff, the educators themselves. They rely on us to make really tough decisions. That's our job. I have more than my share of conversations, which actually surprised me as a classroom teacher, but they really look to us to make those calls. That's what we're here for, right? It's not the burden of a teacher to handle some of these really complex cases. So, and there are many of them every single day. And knowing that we can invest in this way, in a very low, neutral cost way, absolutely speaks to the need of service to our teachers in a most robust way that we're shy of right now. And if you look at those comparison charts, we are not admin heavy at all. I think we are admin lean, and I don't think we've benefited from it at all. We have a lot of gaps, especially in our evaluation system. We have teachers at the high school who say, I might not have been evaluated in the last 15 years. As the principal of that school, unacceptable. I have to change the structures and the systems in that building to serve our teachers and hence our students and their families better.
One
Yes,
quick,
Mary.
and I totally appreciate you speaking about particular people. I guess my one question is, I guess the opportunity for other people to step into a position, like not creating a position for a specific person, but having opportunities for advancement where we're like, hey, we're creating this new.
I'm excited to speak to that.
Okay.
So one of the things that I started in my first semester, it's called the TAPS program. It's the Teaching Assistant Principals program, and it was started years ago, a research-based model across schools across the country. And the idea was our industry limits us, right? So in professional education, we're limited. Most of us, it's either stay in the classroom or jump out. And what a TAPS program did was tap into the expert educators in the room to, one, test and try and serve their school in new ways. That's only accomplishable when we have some flexibility in the staffing. So when people equate under-enrollment with overstaffing, I'm here to say that's not the case. We need staff to grow. We need staff to test and push our practice and our performance. So the TAPS program, we have a science faculty member right now a class was compressed, freed up to serve the school and also learn about school management, school leadership. So we're doing this constantly. We created the Academic Standards Council, led by teachers, the school leadership team, led by teachers. So we're creating opportunities for leadership. Some of them will migrate and merge into official positions, and some will say, that's great, I love serving my school in a new way and not leaving my classroom. So yeah, we are on that and are really active, and our staff-led committees are gaining more ground and more kind of authority in the right ways. Yeah. Did that answer?
No, one more. I'm just, I'd say this, and so my other job is as the chair of nursing at UNH.
Yeah.
So it's like higher ed is different, but I guess my one concern, and I appreciate all the things you say, I've also seen departments or organizations in which that there's a worry for me for favoritism, in that these people always get the same opportunities. Like the low enrollment gets the opportunity. I don't know. I'm processing it out loud.
Yeah,
It's
no,
not a-
thank you for that, because I can address that too. It's not a particular teacher's low enrollment.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a compressed course, so it's distributed, and this is often done in, well, it's always done in partnership with department heads. So they know exactly what's happening when these opportunities arise. And in the first year, I could say, because it's a new idea here, it's quite well established around the country, but the TAPS program I'm referring to, in year one, in year two, we had maybe 3 or 4 people raise their hand. I'd be interested in exploring opportunities in leadership. And then this current year, I think we had 15 people, 12 people raise their hand and say, I'm very interested in exploring opportunities to push my practice, to serve the school differently. Yeah.
Thank you. I know that was kind of an aside, but I super appreciate understanding that.
No,
'cause
important. And thank you. Good clarifying
not.
question.
Thank you, Carrie. Lisa?
I have a couple of comments and then a couple of just really quick specific questions, but I just want to say big picture, I really appreciate having the opportunity to look through 3 scenarios in more granular detail in terms of what specific impact there might be on our educating capacity and how it might impact staff and students if we go with different scenarios. Because I felt like for me that was absent in the earlier budget discussions, which made it a little hard to conceptualize. I think that I am pleased to see the potential in some of these scenarios to add some capacity in special education, in counseling, in social work, because I feel like for years in various ways, this community, this board have said, beyond just the mandated stuff, we want all of our kids to have touch points. We've had our own students come before this board and talk about how so many of them don't feel that they have a trusted adult in our schools, and that's something we value fixing. And that takes people on the ground, that takes time to spend with kids, getting to know them in various ways, and so I am really supportive of that. I do think what this budget process is telling me, at least, is we need a better system for working this out, because I don't want to be here at exactly this date next year going, we had no idea what was happening on the city side, and we made our hiring decisions and our planning decisions in September that are now being cast aside for a budget vote that we're doing later. So I do think that the idea of doing a work session with the council would be really beneficial, and I would love to see that scheduled, maybe not before our vote, because at this point we're already down that train track, but perhaps once the dust settles, to really do that as soon as possible. Because I'd love to empower our administrative team to start their conversations in the fall with the idea of knowing in advance where the city is thinking things are going. Because then we're doing smart planning and strategic decision making about which positions we value and need to support. And if we do need to change things, we're doing it from a strategic, intentional process instead of a panicked, oh my gosh, we have a big gap and we've got to scramble to deal with it process. And I'm not saying that's anyone's fault here, but just that would be my dream. And so since you've taken the time to come here, I have 2 just really quick questions about some of these positions. And one is world language, and I know I'm not on the ground, and I can totally see how we could have capacity for kids to get through level 3, which they need to graduate. I'm having a hard time envisioning how they get to level 6. So if they're trying to get through all of those levels of language and they only have one person who's teaching advanced French and advanced Italian, I'm just not sure how that's happening for kids.
Well, just quick, because I know you have an answer too. There is still a French teacher that is teaching high level
I don't think there is for Italian.
So yes, Italian
Okay,
is the
no, I don't
is
mean
the
to
exception.
misspeak,
Yes,
but I
yes,
guess
yes.
my question is this human? It can't be in 2 classrooms at the same time teaching 2 different languages. So I'm just trying to unpack how that works.
Well, not at the same time.
Yeah,
So,
fair.
but yes, we currently have dual certified, dual language teachers teaching multiple languages at Portsmouth High School.
Okay.
And that system works really well. And it's actually quite remarkable to see it. I think it's also the future of language learning, especially at the K-12 environment. We have really wonderful interns from UNH who are coming out with multiple languages, certified to teach. And so that is happening. That's not an anomaly. It's not something we're anticipating we could generate. We have our current enrollment in French at the high school equates to a full-time equivalent. We are currently and will next year have a full-time French teacher who's many years experienced and ready to go, certified, continuing the professional development 3 times in France, immersive learning. So they are absolutely prepared to maintain the actual enrollment. As it grows, we come back in future years with future requests for a program that's growing. The choice to hire for the second of the 2 retirees out of world language, one being the Italian, just to name it, Italian, and the wonderful Joseph Marquette, Italian and Latin, and Spanish, and Greek, and French, and the polyglot, the amazing polyglot.
Swiss Army knife of.
Yes, the Swiss Army knife of our, and we've relied on his leadership in remarkable ways. So this idea of hiring with a dual cert, in 2 languages, we know how to recruit. Like Zach said earlier, we are still a powerful brand with wonderful, healthy environments to work in, wonderful families and kids and colleagues. So we won't have a problem filling that need. So getting, currently French, we can go right to 6. That won't change at all. How we seek out and recruit for a dynamic Italian or French to maintain those numbers. French is taken care of already, though. That's not, there's going to be no gap there.
Well, also to jump in, the department, Kristen Artanano, the department head,
dual
teaches Spanish, but also 1, 2, and 3 Italian.
Yes, I know.
Yeah.
I'm asking about 5 and 6 Italian, possibly for a friend.
Yeah, and that's where we'll be.
So that's where
we're hiring
the dual
for.
cert would teach.
Fair.
That's where we'll hire for,
Okay.
obviously, yeah. That level of native fluency or
Totally fair.
yeah.
And then my other question, I think, is a similar one around the counseling piece, because we've had this really fantastic system in the middle school and in the high school for a while now, where there's one counselor who loops with kids all the way through that experience to build those relationships. And so I'm just curious, how are we going to sort of build that capacity? How are we building that capacity and for next year for the kids who currently have the counselor who's not there?
So there's some internal operations to manage. The current service model, while it works, also presents some gaps. Like the spring of senior year is also the spring of 8th grade transition. The burden on that team to manage those 2 major life-altering, family-shifting moments is why other schools have very different counseling service models. They're alpha distributed, they're 2-year loops. So that the focus of, these are just examples of schools, right? So a 9-12 loop, because the needs of 9th grade and 10th grade students and families are distinct from our 11th and 12th graders and what they need. So these are things we're exploring, keeping our counseling team at the lead to kind of get into that research and understand. We have developed a whole bunch of models where some of the things that counseling, the core counseling work, which I need to let everyone know, when I arrived 3 years ago, I requested to the department head of counseling at the high school, I said, I need you to sit at the leadership table. Prior to that, counseling, because they are department heads who are in the teaching contract, they confused leadership with administration. And so when I asked the counseling, because I did not want to run a school without counseling at its center and at its core, because it is the core function, that has been a wonderful 3 years of partnership, of growth, of change. The curriculum office that we have at Portsmouth High School also then absorbed some of those logistics, like statewide testing, dual enrollment facilitation, master scheduling. Those were all on the shoulders of counselors. They're now in the curriculum office where they should be, and our counselors can focus on the work. So, and we continue to do this work, this collaborative work together. The idea of a director of counseling, like all the creative ideas that are being presented to you are part of that creative energy of a restructure, of an opportunity.
So is it a loop maybe, but just a shorter loop, if I'm hearing you
Could be.
correctly?
Could be. I mean, there's still work to be done, but an example would be a 9, 10, 11, 12.
Yeah.
But that's not,
There's-
not
yeah, and
definite,
there's a lot.
and we want to make sure we're staff's involved in those conversations.
Yeah, and counseling and yeah. So it's and college counseling, our SAP student assistance program counselor, like our 2 student services counselors. So we have to start looking at it at a much more broad service model for students. And we've already done that. So one example is our support center. The support center is dedicated to 504 students. And that was under the leadership of an individual teacher for many, many years. We had a resignation a year and a half ago. I made the decision not to rehire for that position. Now, these are some of our most vulnerable kids. So you can imagine the sentiments that you think of now that you're hearing yourselves say, what about the most needy kids? So I'm going to describe this scenario because it's really important about how we're approaching some of this restructuring as well. So when the resignation came in on the support center, 80 plus students who need more of us, under one teacher. When I observed that for 2.5 years, or a year and a half, 2 years, I also realized that teacher was somewhat isolated and was not getting the support they needed to support those kids. So in my decision not to rehire that position was to distinctly leverage the opportunity to restructure. And currently, that support center is run, again, at no cost. We have 3 counselors rotating through. We have a dedicated tutor who's there every block of the day. That program is, I could not be more proud of the work of those teachers, the counselors, the tutor, who are in there every day serving. That's the model that cost us nothing to create. We spent 6 months in research, surveying students, families, teachers. Our communication to our colleagues from the support center is better than it's ever been. So teachers now have a trusted resource in a way that's valued because we have 3 rotating counselors and a tutor dedicated to the service of those kids. That's what we're prepared to create and leverage across any of these potential cuts. Our job, it's our responsibility to see these challenges as opportunities. And that is the job of the management of the schools.
Are you finished, Lisa?
I don't want to I could.
I just want to circle back. Well, I'm just going to circle.
I'm not going to.
I just want to come back to your first point, which is around timetables, process. If the city wants to give us guidance, January is not the time to give us the guidance. It's September, and so I know we've definitely had that conversation. I think the city manager is in full agreement that really what we should be doing is maybe having some joint conversation in whether it's August or early September and saying, this is what we project. And as we start having conversations that really begin in the fall and we're trying to do strategic work, knowing what the potential, or just trying to even think about what the potential kind of fiscal confines are of those conversations is so essential so that we can make these types of conversations we're having now about things that we've been thinking about, but we're responding to new variables in the last month. Instead, we're stretching that out over a much longer period of time. It allows more people to be involved in those conversations and thoughtful and whatnot. So we totally agree, and I think the city manager's office is in full agreement that that's what we should do the next time around.
And I know Byron had expressed an interest in that too. And
Yep.
he's not with us, is that correct?
No, he's not.
Just tonight.
That's what I meant. Okay. Thank you, Lisa. Brian is next and then Pip.
Yeah, so I appreciate Zach and second Brian. The first Brian. What you guys have done, and honestly, it's good to see that there's congruency with the strategic plan and that thought was put around it. I know you were kind of chasing because we were given, in the past, the differential has never been quite that big, and so we hadn't had to have, sort of this chase that we're experiencing now. But I think I'm glad to hear that we're talking about what can we do to get ahead of that and have those conversations early. I honestly am in favor of I think it's a really responsible plan, but also adding on the counselors, adding on what is he called, the maintenance supervisor, or I think that could be in one of the pillars or a couple of pillars too. I wouldn't discount that. I know it's not direct
It is
maybe a
safety,
direct
right.
thing,
You're
but
right.
It's safe.
I didn't include it in safety, but it is.
But I think it's, I think I would, think about that and how to include that as well. Because they're all important, and I appreciate you guys really, it's not 4.9%, it's 3.9 something and change. So I think it's really responsible, and I know you guys worked hard on it, but also I'm really encouraged to see that this was really a targeted, thinking about what positions you really need and how it, that coupling with a strategic plan is good, because it allows us to think about it in that way. And honestly, being on that curriculum committee is eye-opening of what good has been coming out of that. And you could see the PLC stuff at the elementary school and them coordinating. It really does take that, teachers are already overwhelmed, and how do you coordinate between each other is a hard thing to do systemically. So having people who are dedicated to that piece of it, to kind of offload that from teachers so they don't have to think about it. I mean, not saying they don't have to think about it, but it's not core function of their job.
Yep.
And also having that higher view of how things are interconnected is important. You can't have that. It's hard to have that as a teacher on the ground in a particular thing. So I appreciate the coordination that, especially the curriculum coordinators. And I do think the plan of stretching it into the middle school is actually pretty good. I don't know if Patty, you came up with that or who came up with that, but that's a pretty good idea. I think that's a great win in order to, it's that last thread to tie off. I know there was some resistance to have one full person there, but I think that's a good compromise as well, and physically responsible as well. So just putting it out there, I'm liking this 3.9, 3.9, whatever. I understand the risks, but I think the risks are sort of baked in to some degree, at least in terms of losses. So it's a less of a risk if we were actually having people on the chopping block, as opposed to we have these retirements sort of there. But I think it also is really aligned with the way I feel that we need to, we put together this strategic plan, let's start executing on it and putting money where our mouth is, so to speak.
Thank you, Brian. Pip?
I agree with a lot of what Brian said in terms of feeling like this is a much more strategic approach, at least in option 3. And so I really appreciate that. I really appreciate that we're looking at the things that really need to be done and connecting them to our strategic plan, rather than just letting go of the people who choose to go. I wanted to ask you about the director of counseling position and why that has come to the surface.
So it's really born of what I see the weakness of the wellness coordinator position. Really. It's like why, what that, I've heard some of the history of how it came to be, but if the board, just overall, if we want to have a position that is that's uncomfortable to say, we believe in student wellness, we have a whole focus area connected to wellness and well-being, and then we're going to pull this position that says it's coordinating those activities. I think the reality is that the position, Steve talked about, kind of the not, that lack of authority in some other stuff. The position doesn't have authority to mandate action. It doesn't provide direct service. And as a result, it has floated to a certain extent. And so I see the director of counseling as trying to, how do we really, how do we take what the spirit of creating a position like a wellness coordinator is, and how do we restructure it so it actually advances that cause in a bigger way? And right now, we have this huge resource, which are our counselors. And those folks, in a lot of ways, the high school is different because it's a larger team that are working together. But but even they are not necessarily connected to what is the middle school doing, what are the elementary schools doing, what is our theory of action about what we believe the purpose of counseling services are in a district beyond broadly helping kids. What do we think works? What do we think doesn't work? How are we going to invest our time? How are the things that we're doing with those positions at like second grade? How are they logically mapped out to fit with what we're going to do at the 7th grade? And how is that and up to the high school? And then what are we trying to do across that spectrum? And I think right now, you would talk to people, we have a lot of, highly trained, well-meaning folks who are kind of operating on their own in some ways. And so there's pockets of really interesting, good things that are going on, but they're not working in unison. And I think about it in terms of like the PLC work. I mean, it's Aaron talked about, cooperation that collectively we're better than individuals. And right now, we are, except for some pockets, those folks are acting in individual professional capacities. And so what I really need is, if for that person, one of the first things for that person to do as they hit the ground would be to work with that department around what is the multi-year plan for K-12 counseling services across the district. How do we articulate what we're doing? How do we know if we're doing it well? What are practices that we really shouldn't be spending that much time on that we are right now? But doing that collaboratively with that group of people. And right now, that's not occurring, and as far as I can tell, has not occurred in the last multiple decades inside the organization. So if we really want to move wellness forward, let's first really improve what's happening with this already existing group of professionals who work for us, and let's do it by taking this other position, which was not well conceived in terms of how it was going to, or at least now in the incarnation that is, however it was conceived, in the incarnation it is now, is not positioned to have the same type of impact.
Okay, thank you. As you know, I appreciate the attention to wellness.
Yeah.
I guess my only hesitation about that is that it feels like we're narrowing the focus of that role so much that it would then only address counseling, whereas I think there are a lot of other areas of wellness that need to be addressed overall across the district. And that's what I wish our wellness coordinator could be empowered to do. I think that you're right, that it hasn't been set up that way, and there's not a lot of authority associated with the role, which there should be. I guess my other, the other piece of that I wanted to say is that I feel like in a budget where we are now not, especially if we are not going to try to hit the 2.9 mark, I feel very uncomfortable about a singular layoff. I think that we don't, particularly in this scenario, we're actually adding cost. So unless it's absolutely necessary to eliminate one person, I just don't feel like I don't feel comfortable as a board doing that. I think if the person isn't performing well, then, you don't renew their contract, or if the position isn't a good position that we need, then we repurpose that person into something else. But it feels uncomfortable to me that we have 11 people who have been offered incentives to leave, and then we're choosing to lay off just one person. If we had to make cuts across the board, then that would be more understandable, but I feel uncomfortable about singling out this one position right now, in not as strategic a way as it could be eventually done. I appreciate now it feels a little more strategic, but That's another piece to me that's made me uncomfortable about losing this role.
Sure. I think what's hard, so as we try to be effective, so good at what we're doing and effective stewards of the taxpayer's dollar, this is a role that when I came in, people were talking about how it doesn't function at the level to which it costs to do. And it's not the person who's in the role's issue necessarily. It's just the role is just not designed to be a $100,000 role, you know? And so as we think about trying to work through things that we would change and reduce, there were some other roles that were similar to that where people took buyouts. And so we didn't have, and the buyout was offered and it's offered as well in this case. So I think I struggle with, if I know a position is not performing at a level where I could justify it to a taxpayer at Hannaford, then I struggle to say, well, we're going to keep people until they're ready to go. And that's really hard. It stinks. It stinks having those conversations. Especially when you don't get into this work to be mean to people. You don't, it's not fun to go through that process. But I don't think I could legitimize the expense for what is coming out of that particular position. And I think that's been something that it sounds like for multiple cycles, people have kicked down the road because I think they knew the conversation about removing a position that on the surface speaks to one of our core values. It would be a hard conversation here. And so people haven't done it.
I know.
So.
Okay.
Point of order?
Yes, it's 10 o'clock.
We
Do we want to continue, or should we?
We have to reopen public
I
comment,
know,
correct, right?
I know, that's the one thing we have to do. We have to reopen public comment.
Motion to suspend rules to continue the meeting until 10:30 or whenever we finish.
10:30.
Is that a motion?
Yes.
Do we have a second?
I'll make a motion to suspend the rules for an extra 10 minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Discussion? Does that include
Discussion?
public comment?
Yes, that
Yes.
will include
Okay.
the public comment. All in favor? We go till 10 after 10. Yes.
Does the cut to the support center staff, is that reflected in the budget?
What cut?
You said that you chose yourself not to rehire for the support center staff.
That was last year.
Last year.
So that was removed from the
part of
budget
last
last
Yeah,
year.
yeah, that was.
Okay.
from
I'm
last year.
also looking at the high school budget, and I see an addition. Actually, hold on. I'm sorry. I guess the first one I noticed here is that there's a teacher salary on page 3 that's removed. What position was that?
Sorry, Brian.
Sorry?
Brian's looking.
Brian's kitchen.
It's last name Zirkelbach.
That was that.
That was
position
it.
from last
That was
year.
that position.
That was that
Yeah.
position last year. Yeah.
Okay, so it was in the budget last year, not in the budget this year, and that's now there. I also see that there's an addition of a 0.5 FTE on the library media salaries. Was that a decision previously made, or is that a new position, a half position that's being added as well?
No, we have a half-time, library, part-time librarian, part-time support.
Did
That was a
position-
retirement, took the incentive, did she?
That was a what? I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Was she one of your buyouts?
In the
Not at the
library?
high
No. If it's a 0.5, it could be that it's the person who's split between the high school and the middle school.
Yeah, that,
And that I don't know if that was living in 207.
No, it was in
Or-
there.
yeah, it's been in 109
Okay.
since I've been on, but that's
But
been a new
there's no
step.
change. That person.
That wasn't a new ad.
There was no.
Nope.
It was moved, probably.
Liv's referring to that the yoga computer position
Mary?
was
Last name
ended
Mary?
and then moved to
Oh,
a third
okay.
one under the
That's-
library media.
That's
Yes.
what it was.
Okay,
So we
so-
reallocated a portion of the computer yoga teacher from because it doesn't, well,
Yeah, here-
it doesn't fit in a category cleanly,
No,
so it's.
yeah, so that's
so-
that was a full-time equivalent. And so, but it was because of the roles and non-departmental, they were split between PE, health and wellness, and media, computer services, and it was its own department. It wasn't really a thing, but that's how they did that. So a year ago, I asked to move it under at least that portion of it, which was media tech,
Yeah.
to media services in the library, which is a more standard
So
function.
that
for,
position though is we're saying that position's being cut now.
that position took the buyout.
Okay.
Yep.
And then I
Portion
guess
of it shows up one place and a portion
Yeah,
shows up
it's,
somewhere
it
else.
looked, it's split between two,
Yeah.
at least two places. Yeah.
Okay, I see it now under computer salaries. My concern is that we have no computer salaries this year, so I didn't know if you could speak to the fact about the architecture cut, what this new engineering program, potentially design engineering, what that would look like if that is going to meet the architecture needs. And, but like, why don't we have any computer teachers
So,
listed?
yeah,
under this?
that's just not a typo, but it's an error in the budgeting structure, the account structures. So we absolutely have a robust and dynamic computer science program. And that's in the CTE chart of accounts, right? So not the 109, the way it's
Okay.
budgeted, but it is a high school program. So that is robust and full and dynamic, from intro to computer science to object-oriented programming to Java and Python and all the dynamic things that lead to.
That's the design engineering or
Nope.
what we have currently?
Nope, that's our what we have currently. Yep.
Okay.
So what you saw as computer services was, I think, to Pip's point, we had staff who were kind of reassigned a lot of different positions over time, but it wasn't necessarily ideal or the best fit and match. So to call it computer services was a bit of a stretch. So the idea of that position in the retirement buyout is just an opportunity now to actually really get specific about what tech, digital fabrication, engineering, media, and what we can offer. In terms of, first I just want to acknowledge Nathan really quick. Thank you, Nathan, for, kind of leaning into that discrepancy. So one of them is the tech requirement for graduation, the quarter credit, is absolutely able to be met across multiple, through our art department in digital photography, in our music department in music technology, in yearbook, in journalism, in intro to computer science. So there is no shortage of ways over 4 years for our kids to meet the tech credit. So that's the backstory. The opportunity to think about a modern approach to design and engineering, architecture being a critical element of that. But when we look at, and this is the tough decisions, that Zach talked about, that we do as managers every day. When we look at declining enrollments over years, and we start looking at those gaps, and how do we invest, how do we support, and all of those things were done, all of those supports, and sometimes it's just the whim of families and kids and choices they make and new opportunities. We have to also look at architecture and design has also now competing against, a new CT. Our health science program is robust and dynamic, and that's meeting a very different need too. So where and how families make decisions that's the beauty of growing and working together as a school with our community. So I have been fortunate enough to lead and develop and design engineering programs for the last 15 years with MIT, with Stanford, with Harvard, with Newton North, with Andover High School. So it's been part of my professional practice. So the design engineering program, we have a 4-year sequence mapped out already. I've run it many times in many schools. It's updated, it's modernized. It's actually crosswalked with our computer science program. So year for year, every skill being taught in a design engineering program, if it were to come to fruition, is also opportunities to engage with our entrepreneurship, our intro to business, our computer science program. So there's It's designed as a crosswalk across multiple departments: physics, advanced chemistry, along with advanced design and art through our visual arts program as well. So that is just a very, it's a very modern and very software, hardware, hands-on, global, sustainability, community service. One of the elements of the program is called EPICS, and these are engineering or entrepreneurship projects in community service. So these are all built in and baked in, and our programs do that a lot. I mean, this is part of the tradition at Portsmouth High School. Our CTE program thriving in community service. So it's a great opportunity to keep expanding these opportunities.
Okay, to why
Liz,
the
Liz.
I'm sorry, a lot of
We're
people
hit-
got to ask questions, and I
Liz,
had none of
Liz,
my questions
Liz,
answered.
cutting you off.
I
You
get
can
it,
wait
but
till
Carrie
March
went on and
25th.
on. We have
Liz,
other.
you can wait till March 25th.
But we're not going to have Steve here, and I have another question
Well,
for him.
Zach will be
I'll
able
be
to
back.
answer.
Steve
for
will
you.
be back.
I'll be back. Yeah, I will.
Okay. We have to reopen our public comment session. You each have 3 minutes. Please state your name and address.
Esther Kennedy, 41 Pickering Ave, and to School Board Member Barrett, I just want to say, to take a long answer and make it short, I agree with you. It is zeroed out, and in the program, that accounting program, you can put a little point where it might go to. So we figured out that they had moved it to another point in the budget, but I would encourage the superintendent and the business administrator, when you do that, just to put a little line item and say, we moved it to 197. So that was a great question. It went a little long, but a simple answer would be put in the line item, put where it was moved to. On the PLCs, I want to thank you for finally doing that. We've had PLCs at Guilford for 14 years. But the PLCs also do a lot of their own design if they're truly a PLC. So I think you have to have that conversation. Given some things that have transpired recently, it sounds like, and it sounds like they're doing a great job moving forward, what is our needs with some of that work? And do we really need to have as much of the curriculum when teachers should really be active in their own curriculum? They've been given the curriculum development from the state and the federal government, the guidelines, and how are they going to work as a PLC team to take that information and put it in their classrooms. I just want to remind everyone, when you're talking about a sole position, you might want to take it in non-public. I think it got a little personal, and that wasn't comfortable for me as an administrator, and I don't think that's appropriate for a staff member. So that was really the reason I came up here to speak. And I think next time I would encourage you on a sole position, especially when people have an opinion, that you take it to non-public. Lastly, I want to thank Nathan for speaking up. I think Nathan was trying to tell you early on, it's the same thing that I'm hearing from the community. They're worried about their taxes. And I hope at the next meeting, we have some just quick answers to some of these many questions that people have. But people in our community are concerned about that. And there was a reason why the council went to 2.9. So I just wanted to keep that in the back of your mind. You heard it from the next generation who doesn't want to deal with our making up of our budgets. And I just encourage you to take that and think about it as you're reviewing your budgets. Thank you and have a good evening.
Thank you, Esther. Petra? No? Okay. All right, well, we don't have any other public comment. We don't do Zoom for the second session of it. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? We'll see you
10,
on
10.
March 25th.
That was a good time.